Chapter 65, Trying to Find Some Answers. Damn, Issei muttered under his breath, feeling disgusted and disappointed. He looked at the floor, his mind slowly piecing together what had just happened. Closing his eyes, he let out a long sigh. Did I kill her? He wondered, though his tone sounded more like a quiet request for confirmation. After a moment, he gave a short, bitter laugh before lowering his gaze again. What kind of insane person? He whispered to himself. He turned toward Kuoh, who was moving restlessly in her chair. She looked at him with eyes full of emotion and tenderness. Forget it, he murmured before walking over and untying her. His eyes wandered briefly over Kuoh's figure, his mind clouded by confusion. Since ending Meidolt's life, something dark and strange had begun to stir inside him, a feeling that made it hard to think clearly. Kuoh made a muffled sound, her words trapped behind the gag. Issei quickly untied the ropes that held her, and as soon as she was free, she threw herself into his arms. They kissed. The boy was caught off guard by a deep, urgent kiss. Kuoh held him tightly, her body pressed against his, and between uneven breaths she murmured softly, "I love you." Some time later, in Issei's room. Once again, the boy sat in his chair, staring out the window at the people passing by. In his lap rested a dirty, worn notebook. He turned his head slightly to glance at Kuoh lying on his bed. Her face showed pure satisfaction, her breathing calm and slow, her cheeks slightly flushed. He blinked. HMPH, he muttered something unintelligible. Boy, you've been acting strange since. DxD's voice trailed off, noticing that Issei seemed lost in thought. It was your first time taking a life, but it shouldn't affect you this much. What are you thinking about? DxD asked. Though he could speak in Issei's mind, he couldn't hear his thoughts unless Issei directed them to him. I mean, did you see her? Issei asked inwardly. DxD said nothing. The fallen angel I fought earlier, she was. He let out a faint, mocking laugh and looked toward the window. Despite the dirt on her face and torn clothes, she was beautiful. DxD opened his mouth, but remained silent. She could have been Issei stood up, smiling faintly. Ha 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 ha, his laughter echoed through the room. A goddess? DxD asked. Issei nodded. Exactly, a goddess. She could have been one, but I destroyed her. I did it, he said, pacing in circles, his expression shifting wildly. Then why not feel satisfied instead of miserable? DxD asked, genuinely confused by his partner's reasoning. Issei stopped and gazed at the ceiling with a nostalgic smile. Honestly, I liked it better when I didn't have a girlfriend. DxD stayed silent. Time passed. Issei sat again, watching the street below. It's beautiful, don't you think, DxD? He murmured. People walking by, each living their own life, each with their own story, their own view of the world, and yet, he trailed off, brushing his fingers over the window frame. Forget it, I just don't like what's happening. I liked it better when goddesses were just that, untouchable, divine. Issei sighed. Now there are no goddesses, only people. I already know what it's like to be with someone, there's nothing new left to discover. Have I reached the end of the game? Why would you be at the end? DxD asked. You haven't even met every kind of being out there. Issei gave a hollow laugh, sitting on the window frame. But the feeling doesn't change. Whether Kuoh is human or demon, it's all the same, he said with a defeated smile. Isn't that what Itachi once said? That beneath beauty or ugliness, people are made of the same flesh and bones? A cold breeze brushed his face as he stared at the street below. Now tell me, what guarantees that being with an angel feels any different from being with a demon? He said before suddenly slapping himself. Smack. He blinked, staring at his palm. I don't know why I said that, DxD, he murmured, confused. I don't even know why I'm watching people on the street like Riaz does, he shouted, his breathing quick and uneven. A few people outside looked up toward his window before continuing on their way. There's nothing wrong with your body, Issei, DxD said calmly. That incident just shook your mind. Rest, it's for the best. Issei nodded slowly. You're right, I should rest. He walked back to his bed, got under the covers, and gently held Kuoh close as sleep overtook him. A few hours later, Kuoh quietly got up. She glanced at Issei, fast asleep, his figure faintly visible in the dark. A small smile formed on her lips before she left the room, disappearing into the night. Chapter 66, All It Takes Is One Move. In Kyoto at night. The beautiful streets were decorated with beautiful red candlesticks that glowed with yellow light, and there were some red tambourines hanging from the buildings, all while the people wore beautiful, clean kimonos, some of them wearing a kind of fox mask that covered their faces. Faced with this scene, Itachi walked calmly while observing how Asia, Rias, and Akino showed expressions of surprise, their cheeks slightly flushed, unable to help but look around them with passion. We're just in time, it looks like this is the last night of the Fox Festival. Itachi's voice broke through the sound of the bustle of people walking here and there. Rias looked at him with a somewhat playful expression. Honey, that means. The redhead had guessed something. Her smile widened, curving her red lips, her beautiful face showing a particular joy. She quickly hugged Itachi's right arm. You've been planning this, haven't you? Rias murmured close to Itachi's ear, gently and gracefully moving her body, pressing herself against Itachi's arm with a little force. You pervert, she blushed, but leaned her head against the ninja's shoulder with a smile showing her white teeth. HMPH, Asia made a noise that was difficult to understand, swallowed the candy in her mouth, and quickly hugged the ninja's left arm. Her movements were gentle, her arms strong, and her face showed the fire of the fight. Itachi, Asia murmured. She couldn't do much against Rias Gremory's large breasts, so she used her cute face, raised her head to show her bright eyes, and looked at her beloved with such passion that it would have been enough to melt any man's heart. You promised, remember? Together. Forever. Asia raised her voice a little on purpose, her eyes focused on Itachi, a gentle but arrogant smile crossing her face as if to say, I got here first. Watching this from a safe distance, Akino had a slightly cheerful expression on her face. She smiled, the kimono she wore barely covering her beautiful figure, and yet her two hands were clasped together, squeezing too tightly. It's nice, isn't it, Akino? She said to herself. Although there are occasional fights between Rias and me, she is happy now. I don't see the trace of existential fear in her eyes that was so distinctive before, she thought, narrowing her eyes at the sight of Itachi being attacked by two beautiful women. A strange feeling spread through her body. She looked ahead, looked at the various stalls of people who had come out to celebrate the Fox Festival, then looked at herself. The image of her mother couldn't help but cross her mind. Akino quickly shook her head, opened her mouth, and hurried to touch Ria's shoulder. President, she said somewhat forcefully. Rias, who was enjoying a pleasant competition, seemed to return to the world and looked back at her friend. Akino, it's you, sorry, I haven't been paying much attention to you. She smiled nervously, about to reach out her hand to hug her old friend around the neck when Akino opened her mouth. I'm going to visit some temples in Kyoto. We'll meet tomorrow at the Yokai Shrine, okay? Akino said, looking away slightly. One didn't have to be an expert to know the truth of what was going on. Akino was looking to the side, rubbing her shoulder with her other hand, and acting slightly shy. Itachi noticed it at a glance, but Rias was preoccupied with other, hotter matters. Oh, is that so? Rias smiled, looked back at Itachi, moved her body so that her enormous breasts brushed against Itachi's arm, and smiled cheekily. See you tomorrow, Akino. Take care, okay? She murmured without giving the situation much thought, slightly raising her free hand and waving it. Akino lowered her head, looked at the floor for a moment, bit her lower lip, swallowed, and then shook her head. I guess she doesn't even care anymore, she muttered to herself, raised her head, and forced a smile on her face. I guess it's okay. Rias deserves to be happy. Akino turned around and began to walk aimlessly. Some time later. Is this it? Akino looked with slight surprise at the statue in front of her. She had walked a few meters away from the bustling festival, and in a small square that had not been maintained for what seemed like several years, lay a beautiful statue. The statue was shaped like a woman with strange features and a mermaid's tail. Its hair was snakes, and its beautiful face was even comparable to hers. The ground beneath the statue was covered in vegetation, while there were some benches that had almost been taken over by nature around the statue. However, before the strange statue, Akino smiled, a strange feeling of calm and loneliness spreading throughout her body. It's beautiful, she said, before sitting down on one of the benches, not even caring about the vegetation on it. The girl looked more closely, her head pointing directly at the statue's face. She scanned it, her gaze passing over the arms and hands of that thing, and saw that it was holding a curved sword popular in Europe. Normally, statues with weapons always carry a katana, right? She didn't finish her sentence. It seemed strange to her, even with her general knowledge of the world. She found it difficult to know the name of that strange, thick curved sword. However, Akino leaned calmly on the bench, looked at the statue with a slightly cheerful face before nodding her head repeatedly. I like it, you're beautiful, did you know that? Heh, she said, seemingly unable to understand that the statue in front of her was just that, a statue. You have two big tits there, hahaha. Men probably can't even look you in the face. That watermelon's there is screaming, look at me. Akino's voice sounded slightly mocking. Look at me, ha 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 ha. She began to laugh a little maniacally, her back completely leaning against the back of the bench and her legs crossed. Ah, heh. Akino smiled, looking up at the sky. She didn't really care much about the statue, it just caught her attention a little, but before she could appreciate the stars, light footsteps were heard not far away. Huh? Akino narrowed her eyes, quickly got up from the bench, and looked in the direction of the sound. Not far away, on the grass, a small boy was walking away from the festival, crying. His arms were wounded, and it looked like there was blood on his face. Akino tilted her head, her previously heightened caution abruptly descending. She looked at the boy with some curiosity and began to move stealthily, leaving the small square, hiding behind a nearby tree, and watching the boy. Why? The boy kept repeating the question to himself as he wiped his cheeks with his hands and took small steps, seemingly without any direction. Why does it always end like this? The boy stopped abruptly, fell to his knees, slowly lowered his hands, and looked up at the sky with a certain nostalgia. He made no sound other than that for a while. The boy simply stood there, looking at the sky with what Akino could call hope, his eyes shining, his body trembling slightly from the cold, not even blinking. After all, the boy let out a small sigh, his hands clenched, his eyes sharpened. After all, I'm alone, he said, his voice filled with such belief in his words that even a priest would have been stunned by such devotion. Akino, in her place, was intrigued, but when she heard those words, her mind went blank for a moment, her body also began to tremble slightly, her eyes dilated, her breathing became a little more agitated, and she felt a slight twinge in her heart. Akino forced a slight smile, a small breeze hitting her face, bringing her some freshness. Ha. The boy's broken laughter conveyed loneliness, acceptance, and finally a desire for justice. Akino felt it, she felt those emotions as if they were her own. Chapter 67, The Strange Boy. Akino let out a soft murmur, blinking slightly, her face showing understanding. Her smile, though slight, genuine, she really felt identified with the boy. However, it seemed she had made too much noise because the boy stood up, quickly looked back, and his eyes focused on Akino. GLPH? He let out a small groan of surprise, startled, jumped a little, and fell backward onto his butt. Haha, Akino couldn't help but laugh out loud. She walked calmly toward the boy, and while he closed his eyes in pain, she had already reached him. She lowered her body slightly and extended a hand. Sorry for scaring you, my name is Akino, what's yours? She introduced herself with a smile, somehow seeing herself reflected in him. HMPH. The boy narrowed his eyes, quickly glanced at the beautiful girl in front of him, and couldn't help but blush. He tilted his head, which made an old smile spread across Akino's face. Come on, get up, don't keep me waiting too long. Akino reached out her hand to help the boy stand up, and after some hesitation, the boy finally accepted. My name is Redragon, The boy was about to introduce himself when he made a surprised face, seemed to realize something, and looked at Akino with anger. You were spying on me? Redragon pointed an accusing finger at her. This surprised Akino. She was about to say something when she thought about it. In fact, she was spying on him. Akino didn't know what to say. Seeing someone accuse her like this was really something new for her. Ha, however, the boy's sudden laughter brought her back to reality. Akino opened her mouth, looked at the boy, narrowed her eyes, saw him laughing while clutching his stomach, clenched her fist, and a mischievous smile spread across her face. Idiot! She gritted her teeth before starting to laugh too. Ha ha ha. They both started laughing, yet neither of them was laughing at what had just happened. Somehow, it was as if they were communicating, sharing similar feelings and seeing themselves reflected in each other. After a moment, they finally calmed down. Redragon looked at Akino with a smile before sitting down on the grass. She did the same, sitting down next to him. Redragon bit his lower lip slightly and shifted his body a little shyly. He seemed about to ask something when he felt something strange in his head. You are, Akino smiled. She was lightly patting the boy's head. He looked at her with narrowed eyes, however. He smiled after that, raised one of his hands to grab the girl's arm, and pressed that palm against her head with a little more force. Akino's eyes opened in genuine surprise. A strange blush appeared on her face before she smiled, unconsciously moving a little closer to the boy. It's cold, she said to herself. What are you doing here alone? Redragon asked curiously. Akino finally pulled her hand away somewhat reluctantly after a moment, turning her head to look up at the sky with a small smile still on her face. Actually, I came with a friend, but she decided to spend time with her boyfriend. Akino's voice was tinged with resentment. The boy tilted his head, curious. She left you alone? At that question, Akino nodded a couple of times. The boy made a slight noise that was difficult to understand, looked up at the sky as well before speaking again. If she left you alone, then she's not your friend. His words immediately made Akino let out a small chuckle. Actually, she's probably not as much of a friend as I always thought she was. Akino sighed. I didn't have a very pleasant childhood. My mother passed away when I was just a little girl, and she was like my sister from that moment on. I mean, we were always together, and that was very nice. Akino paused, shaking her head as if it were a branch swaying in the wind. In a sense, I've known her for many years, and until a few months ago, everything was perfect, but suddenly something changed in the atmosphere. She somehow felt different. She spent a lot of time in front of a window, watching people on the street, and talking about something that should have been in her arms but wasn't. Akino remembered, fixing her hair before clearing her throat. I guess she was anxious for a boyfriend or something, but... She paused, really thinking about what had happened in recent months. It was strange. But I felt strange too. It was as if something had broken in my world. I felt, and still feel, that something is wrong, and when I feel this way, I can't help but remember my mother, she admitted. They both stood there for a moment, gazing at the stars. Redragon looked at Akino's beautiful silhouette with slight admiration. Something broken in your world? He asked after a moment. The girl nodded, placing a hand on her chest as if to emphasize her point. Something broken in the world, but more importantly, a void in my heart that threatens to consume my soul. Akino smiled slightly, closing her eyes as if she wanted to feel the void again. Redragon bit his lower lip. I feel it too, he said finally. The girl opened her eyes suddenly, quickly looked into the boy's eyes, and smiled a wide smile that made her eyes sparkle. I don't know why, but I believe you, haha. Akino let out a slight chuckle. There was something strange about the boy in front of her, something different that made her feel calm, peaceful, and that emptiness in her soul seemed to be slowly filling up with his feelings. Really? Redragon asked, moving a little closer to Akino, his face slowly approaching hers. Akino felt it, saw him coming closer, yet she did not move away. Her body felt a strange sensation of ecstasy, her hair stood on end, her eyes focused on his. Really? Akino said, biting her lower lip, and she also began to slowly move her face toward his. She closed her eyes, her mind in chaos, different positive emotions filling the hole in her soul, all vying for attention. Kiss. Their lips met, and the inexperience of both of them, as it was their first kiss, caused a different current to spread through their bodies, bombarding their minds with a sudden pleasure that took them by surprise. But aggressive and bold as ever, Redragon took the lead, began rubbing his lips against Akino's. His older brother's lessons on how to kiss echoed in his mind, and he took the lead. Akino felt her delicate lips conveying cries of pleasure. The boy was getting closer and closer, feeling his warmth nearby, his body emitting heat, all of which made her muscles relax. Like a doll waiting to be picked up, Akino was helpless as the boy began to move his hands and arms around her waist to take her in an intense embrace. But watching all this from a tree not far away, Itachi Uchiha narrowed his eyes, his Sharingan active as he examined the boy and Akino. "I see," Itachi muttered softly, a strange, serious grimace on his face as he didn't even blink. "This is new, I should report it to Lucifer," Itachi said. Itachi, however, knew the boy's identity. Part of the reason he didn't interfere was because he felt overwhelmed by what Re-Dragon represented in his mind. He lightly caressed his hands, let out a small sigh before opening his mouth. "Shisui, it's really you, no, I?" "It's different," Itachi shook his head. The boy who called himself Re-Dragon looked exactly like Shisui Uchiha in his former life. At first, Itachi was stunned by this, but then, upon analyzing Shisui Uchiha's body, he noticed something different. Not 7, but a single gigantic chakra node in his stomach, just like Issei, Akino, and Ria's. Now, Itachi doesn't really know what to think. "I have to seek Beelzebub's help to analyze this in detail." Itachi wrote one more thing on a small scroll before continuing to observe. Meanwhile, at the great gates of the Yokai Shrine in Kyoto. Here, a clone that Itachi Uchiha had left behind was being hugged by Rias and Asia, who seemed quite affectionate. Several other clones were hidden in the shadows. If anything bad happened, one of them would disappear to warn the real Itachi. Yasaka, inside a beautiful classic Japanese house, was carefully and attentively combing her little daughter Kanu's hair when suddenly a guard interrupted abruptly. "Madam, Lord Lucifer's envoys have arrived. One of them is the new Lord of the Underworld, Lord Uchiha." Chapter 68, The Challenges of the Yokai Tribe. Little Kanu wagged her tail impatiently, her face showing a slight frown as she turned to look at the person who had interrupted her grooming time. She was about to raise a finger and start complaining when her mother gently covered her ears to calm her down. "Come on," Yasaka pressed Kanu's soft ears just a little, making the girl blush as she leaned her head into her mother's hands. Kanu let out a soft sigh, closing her eyes. "Hee, that's better, isn't it?" Yasaka murmured with a small smile before addressing the guard. "Ask them to wait in the garden, prepare a banquet, I'll be there soon." The guard hurried off, leaving Yasaka smiling warmly at her daughter. "Why don't you try to get to know this new demon lord?" she suggested, but Kanu quickly shook her head. "Why should I?" she said with a small sigh, glancing nostalgically at the paintings on the walls while fidgeting slightly, a gesture that Yasaka noticed immediately. Sometime later, at the main gate of the Yokai Shrine. "Why is it taking so long?" Ria's Gremory muttered, narrowing her eyes in impatience. She was about to knock again when the doors slowly opened, revealing the interior. Inside, the shrine resembled a lush nature-themed park, filled with carefully arranged plants integrated with the architecture. A young Yokai girl with delicate features bowed before Itachi. "Lord Uchiha, please follow me," she said politely, guiding Itachi's clone, Ria's, and Asia further inside. The group walked through various areas until they reached the center, where an impressive ancient Japanese-style building stood. A large table was set in the courtyard, laden with an array of delicious food. "HMPH," Asia's stomach growled, prompting Ria's to tease, "Hungry, little blonde? Or is it just your mouth making noises out of surprise?" Itachi's clone and Asia tilted their heads, confused by Ria's teasing. They followed him to the table and began eating. During the meal, Itachi's clone noticed subtle oddities around the shrine. The waitress serving them, while smiling, seemed a bit distracted. Other yokai appeared lost in thought, and faint traces of energy could be felt in the air. "What is your name?" Itachi asked the waitress who was clearing plates. She hesitated, lowering her head slightly, her ears drooping in shyness. "My name is Estella," she said softly, finally meeting his gaze. Her golden eyes shone as she looked at Itachi's clone with a mix of curiosity and expectation. "Estella, huh?" he said with a calm smile, observing her closely. In the blink of an eye, he moved toward her, and with a precise gesture, neutralized the decoy Zetsu she had been replaced by. Yasaka, standing nearby, witnessed the scene in disbelief. She had been preparing to welcome Itachi, but instead saw a young man confronting one of her servants. "No," she shouted, summoning her energy to fire a burst of defensive flames at Itachi's clone. Meanwhile, Estella's form changed as she revealed her true nature, transforming into a white-skinned humanoid with green hair. "Zetsu," Itachi's clone noted, tossing aside the decoy's body. Yasaka's flames struck, causing a loud crash, but the clone vanished into a cloud of smoke, using a replacement technique to avoid harm. Confused, Yasaka cautiously approached the courtyard. The table she had prepared now stood abandoned, dishes half-eaten. "Where is everyone?" she muttered, searching for signs of life with her senses. After a moment, she realized the shrine was empty. Just then, the real Itachi appeared before her. "Hello, I've come to ask a few questions," Itachi said softly, taking a seat. Yasaka stiffened, recognizing him immediately. "You dealt with Estella," she said, her energy beginning to surge. "It was a decoy, not the real one," Itachi explained, pointing toward the white Zetsu's body. Yasaka looked closely, frowning at the strange figure. "That's unusual," she muttered, recalling Estella's recent strange behavior, especially her interest in Kanu. The original Estella had always been loyal and diligent. Itachi remained silent, focusing on the matter at hand. Yasaka, still wary, finally asked, "I came to discuss Orochimaru," but Itachi offered no immediate explanation. Chapter 69, Fear Reigns in Kyoto. "You're a really cold guy," Yasaka nodded, once again using his senjutsu to try to sense life in the shrine, and then attempting to extend his senjutsu throughout the city without success. "Just as I thought." A slight smile spread across her face, her frown softened, her eyes looked at the ninja with curiosity. "This isn't the real world, is it?" she guessed as she grabbed a chair to sit down. "You're astute. In fact, you're in my world," Itachi nodded, also sitting down on a chair, shaking his head slightly to indicate to Yasaka to calm down. "I've been to Kyoto before when I was a child," the ninja smiled, remembering something apparently beautiful. "The Fox Festival was much, much livelier. Did something happen?" Yasaka stared at the table for a moment before raising her head. "HMPH," she took a deep breath before exhaling wearily. "You must be Lord Uchiha, the one everyone talks about," she said without answering the ninja's question. "You're very young, but you have a strange attitude." "Haha," Yasaka continued. "Your seriousness almost makes it seem like you've killed hundreds, no, thousands of people, ha 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 ha." Yasaka began to laugh lightly to ease the tension in the garden. Her attitude changed very quickly, from initial shock and hatred to laughter, but in reality, she was analyzing the ninja's body language. Itachi didn't laugh, he simply waited for the answer to his question. "HMPH," she looked at the boy with slight dissatisfaction. "Why aren't you laughing? Have you killed hundreds or thousands of people?" she joked, but the ninja continued to look at her calmly and seriously. Okay, Yasaka spoke aloud, slightly mockingly. "Are young people today always as bitter as you?" A mischievous smile spread across her face, but Itachi remained where he was without even flinching. Yasaka tried to joke a couple more times, but seeing that her attempts were fruitless, she bit her lower lip slightly. "What kind of guy is this?" she wondered before shaking her head. "Lord Uchiha, in fact, the disappearances in Kyoto are more alarming than those in Kuoh. At least 10% of the total population of men and women have disappeared." Yasaka began to speak after a while. "The bodies of some of these missing persons were found in disastrous situations. Sometimes only their skin was found, as if all traces of bone or muscle had been erased, and other times they were simply found cut into pieces." She looked down with a strange, real fear running through her body. "I mean, I don't like to dwell on this, but whatever was behind it has no humanity. Bodies were found with all kinds of torture, with their reproductive organs mutilated, eyes gouged out, or simply starved to death." Yasaka's body trembled slightly, and she looked at the floor in horror before raising her head to look at the ninja. "Even in the old war, I had never seen such a level of evil." Yasaka's eyes reflected genuine concern, her face slightly pale and her lips pursed. "The first time was a scandal, but when these findings became more frequent, the government intervened, sending soldiers to investigate, and I, for my part, sent my warriors." Yasaka let out a snort of derision, looked away before turning back to Itachi. "They all ended up hanging in the woods." Yasaka was regretful. One could see it in her eyes. I try. HMPH. I try to smile and bring some joy to Kyoto, but people are terrified. More than half of them hardly leave their homes, and it almost seems like everything is getting worse. Yasaka exhaled, rested her head against the back of her chair before stretching her arms out, then grimaced, grabbed a cup of hot tea nearby, and began to drink. HMPH, she made a slight noise with her mouth, a noise of satisfaction. Even though it's an illusory world, you can give flavor to something as mundane as tea, Yasaka said between sips of tea. The underworld has decided to reveal the existence of the supernatural to the world. They will do so in a few days from now, but I think you already know that, Itachi said after a while. Yasaka was not surprised. There's something I've noticed for a while, but I've been ignoring it, and that is, the humans of this world shouldn't have chakra nodes, or at least not according to my hypothesis, Itachi said, then looked to the side. Isn't that right, Lord Beelzebub? Itachi's words quickly caught Yasaka's attention. She quickly turned her head toward where the boy was looking, and sure enough, there was Ajuka Beelzebub with a smile on his face. Yasaka immediately stood up, smiled slightly, leaned forward a little, and said, "Welcome to Kyoto, Lord Beelzebub." Huh? Ajuka watched this with amusement, quickly glancing at Itachi and then at Yasaka. Did you bring me to an illusory world too? Wow, I didn't know you had this ability, Uchiha, but I think I can leave this world if I want to, Ajuka muttered, his words betraying a hint of surprise and a hidden intention to tell Itachi that he couldn't trap him in an illusion. If I'm not mistaken, Lord Beelzebub has the ability to distort reality at will. In this illusory world, my ability to distort reality is also good. Itachi smiled, looked Ajuka in the eyes, and the Demon King returned his gaze. Both seemed about to start arguing. Lord Uchiha, what are chakra nodes? Yasaka quickly noticed this, cleared his throat, and changed the subject, hoping that the two men would not fight. Chakra nodes are points where chakra is concentrated and created. It's common in my world. In fact, where I come from, everyone has 7 chakra nodes. Itachi gave a brief explanation as Ajuka walked over to the table to take a seat. Actually, humans in this world shouldn't have any chakra nodes, nor should demons, angels, or fallen angels. This is something that has caused Surzech's concern, Ajuka interjected as he grabbed a cup of tea and drank it in one gulp. HMPH, delicious. Ajuka shook the teacup with satisfaction, looked at Itachi, and pointed at the cup with obvious intentions. For his part, the ninja frowned, sighed, and in the next moment, the teacup was full of hot tea again. Hehe, isn't it wonderful to modify reality? Ajuka drank the teacup again. Surzech believes that there is something wrong with Ria's and her peerage. He guessed that the reason she and the others have a chakra node was because Orochimaru had something to do with it. Ajuka said his thoughts. Yasaka moved his ears slightly, listened carefully, and looked at Itachi. I also came to that conclusion. The fact that Ria's, Akino, and Issei have a single, fairly large chakra node is something that only Orochimaru could cause. Furthermore, in the small town, I also found another boy with that same giant chakra node, the ninja added, remembering how he saw that boy who looked too much like Shisui. However, I didn't mention it before, but Asia Argento has 7 chakra nodes like any human in my previous world, so? Itachi didn't know how to finish his words, and Ajuka listened to him with a serious expression. Asia, is that the girl who is always with you? Ajuka said. Itachi nodded. HMPH, 7 chakra nodes. I really don't know why, if Orochimaru is the cause, he would do all this. I can't think of an explanation, Ajuka nodded before drinking the tea in his cup. When we met in the forest, she told me she wanted to see the world turn or something like that. I didn't really take it seriously, and I don't think we should, but... Itachi also took a cup of tea to begin drinking the liquid of his own creation. Itachi thought for a moment about the boy who looked like Shisui and kissed Akino, about the single chakra node in him and the 7 chakra nodes in Asia Argento, about the absence of chakra nodes in the beings of this world. Maybe he's trying to create an artificial world tree, Itachi said after a while, drawing the attention of everyone present. The ninja looked at them with slight amusement. Hehe, the world tree was. He began to narrate the legend of the world tree of the ninja world, from how it was the cause of the beginning of chakra to how it was used to form the body of the sage of 6 paths. Ajuka and Yasaka's faces went from initial curiosity to surprise and finally slight horror. They looked at each other, each thinking that Itachi was exaggerating. Chapter 70, Reaching an Agreement. Finally, after some time, the three came to the conclusion that they would not find clear and concise answers unless they caught Orochimaru. With this, the Yokai and the demons will sign an alliance against Orochimaru and anyone who collaborates with him. Beelzebub finally took out an alliance treaty, which Yasaka read for a moment before signing. Yasaka smiled as the agreement slowly vanished into thin air. Itachi watched this with satisfaction, and Beelzebub nodded. According to the latest report, Lucifer and the others will most likely decide that supernatural beings should make themselves known to the human world as soon as possible. As for you, Yasaka, when would you like to see the Yokai reveal themselves to the world? In response to Beelzebub's question, Yasaka shook his head slightly. It's fine with me as long as it's as soon as possible. For now, I need the people in Kyoto to stop disappearing and form a barrier against Orochimaru. Ajuka nodded slightly at these words, looked at Itachi with calm eyes before sighing. Itachi, your contribution has been positive. You are a good demon lord. Normally, I would tell you that we now need to form an alliance with the Nordics, however. The demon shook his head with some sadness. Lord Lucifer has been trying to communicate with Odin without success. The fallen angels still do not respond, and we have lost all communication with Michael of the Angels. I fear that something strange is happening in the world. Beelzebub had a sad look on his face. He was a little more tired than usual, and Itachi sighed to calm him down. After the disappearance of the Phoenix clan, the barriers to enter the underworld have been reinforced. The Demon Council has decided to establish 2 bases in Kyoto and Kuoh. There are several high-ranking demons commanded by Seraphal, and I will lead a legion. I will be here in Kyoto, and Seraphal will be in Kuoh. Ajuka finally smiled. Maybe you'd like to go to Kuoh to visit Seraphal for a while? Ajuka smiled. Itachi shook his head before thinking about that rather strange girl. For now, I feel comfortable traveling the world, although I haven't been very active in the search for Orochimaru. Itachi nodded a couple of times. Well then, it's decided. Beelzebub smiled before standing up. Do you want to take us out of the illusion, or shall I do it? The demon smiled slyly. Yasaka also stood up. I can also leave the illusion, Lord Itachi. She cleared her throat. The next day, in a building not far from the Yokai Shrine in Kyoto, Akino slowly opened her eyes and let out a slight sigh as she nodded, her body shuddering with a hint of pleasure. She blinked a couple of times before beginning to remember what had happened. She let out a slight sigh as she grimaced with exhaustion and yawned. Me, HMPH, ha. She couldn't help but let out a slight laugh as she got up from the soft bed and moved away from Redragon's warmth. She covered her body with the sheet and watched the beautiful boy sleeping peacefully in bed. As her eyes filled with the image of the boy, her heart couldn't help but beat faster, her body filled with affection, and she couldn't help but bite her lower lip. Too cute, she murmured, quickly glancing around the room and scratching her head. Will the president be angry if I took this boy to turn him into a demon? She wondered, quickly getting out of bed, walking with some difficulty due to the pain in her legs, and heading for the shower. Redragon was really tired. He didn't wake up even with the sound of the shower, and it wasn't until an hour later that he slowly opened his eyes. His body, as if by instinct, moved to try to hug the girl who should be near him, but he found nothing. HMPH. Half asleep, Redragon made a sound, tried to hug the girl who should be next to him again, but when he found no one there, he quickly opened his eyes and got out of bed. Akino, he called out, looking around his room for any trace of the girl who had accompanied him last night, but finding nothing, he patted his head in confusion, rubbed his eyes, and then focused on a small note left on his nightstand. Has she left? He wondered, remembering how he talked to Akino last night. He really felt a genuine connection with her, his heart beating in time with that voluptuous and beautiful girl. Humph! The boy let out a slight sigh as he remembered the previous night. He quickly pushed all the thoughts that were weighing on him to the back of his mind and concentrated on the note. With a sense of resignation, he picked it up to read it. Hi, Redragon, it was a lovely night, really. My first time, ha ha ha, although I think you already figured that out, HMPH. I mean, would you like to meet up tomorrow? If you want, here's my number. Redragon sighed with relief after reading the letter, smiled brightly, lay down on the bed while looking coquettishly into space. Tomorrow. Meanwhile, at the Kyoto Shrine. The preparations are ready, Lady Yasaka. At noon today, the demons of the underworld will release thousands of statements on television. It has also been agreed with the Council of Elders that thousands of demons will have their own peerage, and they will go out to collect humans for our ranks. Beelzebub said he was having breakfast at a beautiful table in Yasaka's courtyard with Itachi and Queen Fox herself, talking business. Demons really don't waste any time when it comes to these kinds of situations, huh? Yasaka smiled happily before taking a sip of tea. Beelzebub was not offended. On the contrary, he smiled brightly. Yesterday, we tried to establish a connection with the angels, fallen angels, and Norse gods, but we only got a vague response from heaven. Itachi quickly looked in Ajika's direction upon hearing these words. They only responded with a few words. We need time. Beelzebub narrowed his eyes. Time? Itachi and Yasaka repeated at the same time, both looking at each other with some curiosity. Beelzebub looked back at them confused. Something has happened that forced Michael to close the gates of heaven. I'm not sure, but it could be related to Azazel. Beelzebub came to a conclusion. The room remained silent for a moment until Itachi finally stood up. HMPH, both Yasaka and Beelzebub looked at the ninja with curious eyes. Is something wrong? They asked. Yes, in fact, I'm going to lead a frontal attack against Grigori. Beelzebub and Yasaka put down their teacups when they heard this from Itachi. They looked at him with wide eyes, each thinking that the boy had perhaps gone mad. Beelzebub and Yasaka were about to say something to Itachi when they thought about it for a moment. In fact, Beelzebub was thinking about this too seriously. In fact, Lord Lucifer said that a new great war is likely to begin, so it may be a good idea for Lord Uchiha to lead a frontal attack against Grigori. Beelzebub nodded before looking at Itachi with bright eyes. I really want to know, what is your maximum level of power? You never fought Riaz seriously. No one saw you really fight, and when you introduced yourself, you simply released your aura as a special demon. Beelzebub was genuinely curious. He was really interested in discovering the ninja's true strength. Yasaka also looked at Itachi with curious eyes. From your skills with illusions, I'm afraid you're more of a strategist than a battle tank like Surzech's. Am I wrong? She guessed. And in fact, she was right. My maximum level of power? Itachi wondered aloud. Come to think of it, he hadn't used his most powerful skills in decades and feared he had become rusty. The ninja looked at his palm and closed it as if making a fist, looked at Beelzebub and Yaska, and began to think about how much he had changed since his last battle with Sasuke. I haven't activated Mangekyou in over a decade, nor Susanoo, Tatsuka, or Yada. Well, my chakra had recovered to the maximum point of my previous life before I became a demon, but he narrowed his eyes, thoughtful. The new energy, the magic he gained by transforming into a special demon, had mixed with his chakra, increasing his chakra reserves at least tenfold, just as his body had grown stronger, now dozens of times more powerful than it had been. Itachi really had no way of guessing his maximum power level, but he opened his mouth anyway. Perhaps at the level of Madara or Hashirama, he said, causing the two present to tilt their heads in confusion. Chapter 71, Orochimaru's Preparation. Meanwhile, in a forest far from Kuoh and Kyoto. Forbidden style, Edo Tensei, Orochimaru made hand seals at high speed before crouching down to touch the ground. The next moment, a pile of coffins emerged from the ground in front of him. Once they emerged, the coffins opened, revealing completely healthy bodies inside. Unlike those traditionally revived by Edo Tensei, these resurrected bodies did not have cracks all over their faces or body. Their eyes were completely normal, just as they had been when they were alive, and their expressions were full of humanity. The improvement of Edo Tensei has been a complete success. With the improvement of Senjutsu, the revived have now connected with the nature of the world. The snake licked his lips with a bright smile. Orochimaru, whose body had completely changed, was analyzing the bodies of the resurrected. But what one would notice most in this place was Orochimaru's own body. The snake had changed completely. His previously white skin now had a greenish color, while his bright yellow-green hair moved in the wind. Lord Orochimaru, Kaneko, completely transformed into a cat girl, with ears and a tail moving behind her, looked at the revived with eyes full of confused feelings. Especially when she saw a blonde-haired boy inside one of the coffins, she felt a slight pang of guilt in her heart, yet she did not show these feelings and her face remained expressionless. Now that you have achieved your goal, can you help me go hunting? The snake couldn't help but laugh at the little cat girl's request. Oh, of course, you've helped me so much lately. Although you've already gained enough power to kill Kuroka, I don't want my little kitty to have a single scratch. He raised a hand to gently stroke Kaneko's head and cat ears. Zenovia, Irina, Kiba. Orochimaru shouted the names of 3 people, immediately after which 2 girls and a boy came out of their graves, disappeared due to their great speed, and appeared in front of the snake, kneeling on one knee and bowing their heads. At your service, Lord Orochimaru. They bowed, and the snake smiled brightly, leaning down to touch their heads as if patting each of them. You have been improved by little Kaneko's senjutsu. Now you will return the favor and accompany her to kill Kuroka. Do you understand? The snake did not hesitate to speak, and the 3 bowed their heads a little lower. Yes, Lord Orochimaru. With that settled, Kaneko set off in one direction, followed by Irina, Zenovia, and Kiba, revived by the improved Edo Tensei. Watching them leave, the snake had a half-smile on his face. Too similar to that Tsunade, hehe, he said, looking at Kaneko's back. It doesn't matter. Soon we will all be reunited with the world, and we will be able to observe the changes that arise in it. Risevim, Ravel, Riser. He shouted the names of 3 beings again, and in the next moment, 3 other revived came out of the coffins and knelt frantically before the snake. Go to laboratories 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the territory of Little Azazel, gather everyone, and attack the gates of heaven. Yes, Lord Orochimaru. Those 3 former powerful members of the Phoenix clan left, and before Snake could continue giving orders, a white-haired boy appeared behind him. The boy's arrival caused a strong and powerful wind that made the treetops suddenly and rapidly move around them. The boy had an arrogant look on his face. His formerly white and perfect face now changed to a greenish-yellow tone. The boy, Vali Lucifer, looked at Orochimaru with narrowed eyes, then looked at the pile of coffins with beings closing their eyes not far away and felt absolute disgust deep within his body. Interrupting the natural cycle of reincarnation is an offense to the god of the Bible, Orochimaru, Vali interjected, taking a few steps forward with some repudiation as he focused his gaze on the snake's yellowish-green hair. HMPH, however, Orochimaru made a sound difficult to understand with his mouth before he started laughing. Hehehe, well, I mean, that's true, but isn't it like that God is alive to stop me? Right. His head turned completely with his body without moving to look at Vali. Such an action made the white-haired boy smile and spit not far away. Well, Orochimaru, who knows, God is probably alive, don't you think? Vali closed his eyes with a smile. However, his small statement brought a frown from the snake. Do you think God is alive? He asked. Well, who knows, Vali replied. They stared at each other with narrowed eyes for a moment before Orochimaru smiled. Almost, but no. God is dead, and there is no other explanation. Besides, whether God is dead or not, death is something I have always fought against. Vali took several steps forward, shaking his head as he looked at the beings revived by Edo Tensei. I really don't care. Azazel has received news that the demons plan to reveal themselves to the human world and will begin recruiting them at noon. There was a brief moment of silence after Vali's words, but Orochimaru's face showed no surprise. That's clear. That's why I'm here. I'm going to gather the humans I've captured and enhance to start a new slaughter throughout Japan. I will revive and enhance those who die, and we will form an army of millions. Orochimaru smiled from ear to ear. Stupid, Vali could only say before walking away from Orochimaru, spreading his wings and flying away. Meanwhile, not far away, Kaneko, Kiba, Irina, and Zenovia charged forward at great speed. jumping from tree branch to tree branch like ninjas from the shinobi world. Kiba, Irina, and Zenovia, killed and enhanced by senjutsu, had now completely regained their thoughts and ability to speak. The new Edo Tensei was different and controlled them at a higher level. It was no longer necessary to suppress their thoughts or mouths. Orochimaru simply needed to give them an order, and they would carry it out no matter what, which also meant a saving in mental energy for the snake. "It's been a while, Kaneko," Kiba tried to start a conversation, but the cat girl remained silent. The boy didn't frown, on the contrary, he bit his lower lip and opened his mouth again. "What happened to the president?" the boy asked, but again he got no response. Irina and Zenovia looked at each other, slightly confused. They had no intention of talking to Kaneko. After all, it wasn't long ago that they traveled to Kuoh on a mission and were killed by this cat girl. "The president had a little problem, or something like that. The last time I saw her, she kept looking out the window, as if something about the people walking down the street caught her attention," Kaneko finally said after a while. Kiba nodded in understanding, blinking before sighing with some guilt. "Why are you still chasing your sister?" Kiba couldn't help but ask, but Kaneko remained silent. "Why, even the question is silly. This girl is a murderer after all. She killed us without even a valid reason," Zenovia said with some anger, breaking the silence. Irina, to her right, nodded her head in agreement. Chapter 72, Finding Some Clues. Kiba continued to wait for Kaneko to respond, but she continued to lead the way. "Tusk!" Zenovia cursed under her breath, staring at the cat girl's back with genuine hatred in her heart. She could still remember how she had been attacked by surprise and killed with a couple of blows by this girl some time ago. "Did you ever even think that I would have a family to return to?" Zenovia raised her voice. She tried to move her own body to control it, but that was, of course, impossible. No matter how hard she tried, or how much she forced her mind to obey her body moved of its own accord, obeying Orochimaru's orders. The group remained silent for a moment before Irina spoke, breaking the silence. "No one who has allied themselves with that snake can have feelings," she let out a slight sigh. After all, in her current situation, she could only obey. Kiba, on the other hand, remained calm. He was already dead, and he really didn't care about much in this life. "Kaneko, if we manage to kill your sister, what will happen next? Where will you go?" Kiba's sudden question made the cat girl frown. She clenched her fists and continued to stare ahead without even opening her mouth. Kaneko's eyes were completely red, her mind clouded. Several thoughts were running through her head. Of course, over the last few weeks, she had been thinking carefully about Kuroka. "I'll probably have to continue serving Lord Orochimaru," she muttered very quietly, so quietly that none of the people behind her could hear. However, the girl nodded her head at her own statement. "It's the price I have to pay." Kaneko pushed all the bad thoughts out of her mind after encouraging herself. She quickened her pace and continued advancing. A few hours later, the world was in relative peace. People walked from their jobs to their homes, and from their homes to their jobs. Children and teenagers were in school, young adults were in their university, and everything flowed like any other day. But, right at noon, all cell phone, computer, television, and other screens suddenly changed, showing distorted images and strange sounds before the face of a man behind a small desk slowly began to stabilize. Around the world, people quickly noticed this. Cars stopped in the middle of the road, pedestrians stared at their cell phones, and some looked up to observe the screens where advertisements had previously been displayed. "What is that? Is someone trying to hack the screens?" Several pedestrians couldn't help but murmur, looking at each other, all confused. It wasn't until the images on the screens stabilized that the man behind the desk began to speak. "My name is Sir Lucifer. I have interfered with all the screens in the world. I have interfered with all communications in the world, all to give you a little announcement." The man cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention. Several pedestrians couldn't help but chuckle, some even mocked him. "What did you say your last name was?" "Lucifer. Ha ha ha." They were about to make a joke when Sir spoke again. "The world is under threat. A being from another world has come to interfere with the peace that existed between angels, demons, and fallen angels. Now, you may not believe me, but just give me a little time and I will be able to prove it, because... Many people began to narrow their eyes, others were murmuring more loudly in low voices. In the castle of the Emperor of Japan, Prime Minister Hirohito rushed through the door of Emperor Naruhito's offices. Hirohito's face was distorted, his lips pursed, his eyes red, and sweat running down his face. Naruhito was surrounded by beautiful young girls in their 20s, each wearing a beautiful semi-human costume. Among them were an elf, a cat girl, a leopard girl, and a tanuki girl. They were scantily clad as they smiled and played. Sir, please, that's not a real tail." The cat girl blushed as Naruhito leaned slightly and pulled her tail. The cat girl moaned in a rather cute way, causing Naruhito to laugh. "Heh, if it's not real, then why don't we take it off?" Naruhito was about to go into battle mode when Hirohito intervened. "Kaya!" Naruhito's girls screamed in surprise, covering themselves with their skirts at full speed as Hirohito desperately entered. "Damn it!" Naruhito shouted, quickly standing up and revealing his completely naked body to his prime minister. He was about to yell when Hirohito took the lead. Sir, the army has reported that all the screens in the world have been hacked. Furthermore, Lord Lucifer of the underworld is speaking. He seems to have something important to say." Naruhito had raised his hand to hit Hirohito until he was exhausted, but Hirohito spoke quickly, causing the emperor to open his eyes in surprise. "What?" The emperor was stunned. He quickly put on a robe and began to chase after Hirohito. After running to a control room and being greeted with military salutes by the soldiers there, Naruhito saw the report. What Hirohito had said was true, and a screen in the control room showed Sirzet's Lucifer speaking. "Shit," Naruhito cursed, looking in horror at the person on the screen. He knew him only because of his father, Maruhito. That red-haired, beautiful-looking man, over 300 years old, was the Demon King, the devil. Naruhito felt a sudden fear and almost fell backwards, but his years of experience forced him to stand up and watch the screen closely. "Humans of the world, now more than ever we must unite. Orochimaru and his allies have evil plans, but I have to stop him, we have to stop him, we can do it. Together." Sirzech stood up in the screen. "Now, I want you to know that demons and angels are real. I am the supreme leader of the demons in the underworld, Lord Lucifer." With that said, the screen showed Sirzech beginning to unleash his power. The image began to distort, and wings emerged from behind him. In the world, humans, although unable to sense Sirzech's magic, felt genuine fear, a kind of premonition bathing their bodies with cold water of knowledge. They knew, almost instinctively, that the red-haired man was telling the truth. In their minds, genuine fear and a desire to kneel took center stage, telling them that they must obey. "We, the demons, will begin recruiting humans for our peerage. Join us and fight. Let's fight against Orochimaru's evil plans." Sirzech said with such emotion and fervor that his words reached the hearts of every human in the world. A moment later, the screens, as if turned off, went completely dark. In the observation room, Naruhito finished watching this, took a few steps forward, looked at Hirohito waiting for orders, lowered his head, thought of various ways to express his thoughts, but ultimately couldn't. Naruhito was confused. Why would the demons finally reveal themselves to the world? Hadn't they signed a treaty with the angels and fallen angels not to involve humanity in their battles? Naruhito was somehow exhausted, so he simply looked at Hirohito, his eyes shining. He knew almost instinctively that Lord Lucifer would not lie in this way. "Call all the media outlets. Tell them that Lord Lucifer's words are true. Demons, angels, and fallen angels exist. This has been a state secret for too long." Hirohito nodded to Naruhito. "My lord," Hirohito was thinking about something when the emperor stepped forward. "And tell them that if they can join a peerage, whatever it is, it will be a good thing, it will be beneficial to them, the world will change." Chapter 73, Orochimaru's Reaction. The world was in complete shock. The responses of world leaders in Japan, China, Europe, and the US were the same. Demons, angels, and fallen angels exist. It had been a state secret to protect humanity for centuries. People who thought it was all a joke fell silent after hearing the statements from the world's most powerful nations. They all stopped what they were doing, stopped working, and gathered in their homes to talk to their families about what had happened. But no matter what they talked about, all humans knew that the world would change and that soon there would be a new war against something unknown. Then a question appeared in the minds of humans. Who is Orochimaru, and what exactly does he want to do? In a forest near Hokkaido Prefecture, Orochimaru had finally finished gathering the elite revived by Edo Tensei. Approximately 1,000 revived beings, including angels, fallen angels, demons, and some humans with different sacred gear. Each one was fully conscious and enhanced to a level that multiplied their power in life more than 5-fold now in their revived state. Kyukuku, why don't we start the killing? Orochimaru muttered happily. After all, what stood behind him, the 1,000 revived by Edo Tensei, was nothing more than the pinnacle of his scientific research. Increased regenerative ability, control of senjutsu, chakra at the level of a jinchuriki, everything has been added, and finally, each of you has all these abilities. Isn't it beautiful? Orochimaru smiled crookedly. Just as Orochimaru was about to begin his attack on Hokkaido Prefecture, Vali appeared behind him again, just as he had hours before. Orochimaru made a small grimace of displeasure. He was about to tell Vali to leave when he noticed something different about him this time. Azazel told me I should accompany you in case something bad happens. The entire underworld is on alert for a possible attack from you. Most likely, some legion commanded by a demon lord will try to stop us. Vali explained the reasons for his arrival. Orochimaru, however, smiled brightly, stroked his green hair before speaking. Now I have completely mastered Kaniko's senjutsu and the senjutsu of the Dragon Sage mode from my previous world. I am one with nature, in addition to having studied and refined the cells of the Phoenix family. Do you think any demon lord can still defeat me? The snake was arrogant. However, Vali let out a small laugh. Ha 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 ha. He was about to say something, but preferred to change the subject. I don't know, well, since you've helped me master senjutsu too, I might as well stay here. Besides, I want to meet this Itachi you talk so much about, Vali said. But Orochimaru shook his head. I have certainly surpassed the Itachi who only used chakra and Sharingan, but the Itachi who has become a special demon? It's likely that even you would die before him. He was completely serious when he uttered these words. We won't know until we find out. Shall we begin the hunt? In the city of Kuoh. Here, several demons emerged in the streets, many of them spreading their wings and showing themselves to humans. At first, civilians found it difficult to believe, but when they showed their powers, there was no room for doubt. In this context, the civilians of Kuoh went from surprise at first to struggle and finally acceptance. They looked at the demons with caution, and some of the more greedy even took the initiative to propose themselves as good candidates for reincarnated demons. Watching the scene of a person slightly moving their body and showing their good attitudes to a demon not far away, Issei and Kuryuu were confused. They took their hands out of their pockets and simply stood there, observing all this from a distance. Shortly after, they looked at each other before observing their surroundings. The world has changed in just one day. It almost seems like the cute city I know has been forgotten, Issei said quietly, moving his hands to hug Kuryuu while stroking her head. Why didn't the president inform us of this situation? In fact, Issei also had that same question. As he hugged the little girl, he couldn't help but look up at the sky. He narrowed his eyes in doubt, sighed slowly, and then simply nodded his head. Well, I don't know. I mean, it's not like I've been training to get stronger lately. I haven't talked much with the president lately either. She doesn't seem to be in the mood to tell me her problems either. Issei began to talk about his recent relationship with Ria's Gremory. Kuryuu listened, felt Issei's body get a little warmer, and smiled at the end of it all. However, she still gripped Issei's arm tightly. It's just the way it is. Besides, Kaniko and Kiba aren't here either. Ria's has been staring out her window for a long time without even talking to anyone. Kuryuu cleared her throat, and while Issei couldn't see her, a macabre smile appeared on her face. She bit her lower lip hard. Issei, she murmured, blushing, her voice sounding so tender and sharp that it was very difficult to know what would happen. Huh? Issei looked down at Kuryuu, and as he hugged her, he couldn't help but feel a slight chill run down his spine. Kid, no matter what happens, you need to become stronger. D-Drake's voice sounded in his mind again, but Issei ignored it, simply focusing on his love for Kuryuo. Why don't we forget about Kuoh Academy, forget about Ria's Gremory, and go live far away? Kuryuo's voice sounded with such clarity and love that even the most enamored girl would pale at her tone. However, the little girl's almost crazy smile was completely contrary to the feeling conveyed by her words. Issei thought about it for a moment, hugged Kuryuo tightly, felt the fragility of her small body impacting against him, and couldn't help but smile. Forget all this? The boy repeated, frowning and looking in the direction of Kuoh Academy, where he had lived half his life, where he had met Ria's Gremory, where he had also met Rainier, and where he had met little Kuryuo. For a moment, the boy felt reluctant. Forgetting Kuoh Academy meant forgetting a large part of his life, but something inside him told him that his future with Kuryuo could be brighter. Leaving everything behind to live with you? Issei smiled, looking up at the sky as night fell. We'll move somewhere else to a town further away from the city. We'll buy a nice house and live together, far from the hustle and bustle of the city, far from the 6 o'clock morning alarms, far from the constant struggle for efficiency. Issei began to speak, his words sweetening Kuryuo's ears. The girl hummed as she closed her eyes, moving slightly as if dancing in Issei's embrace, shaking her head, beginning to imagine a future with Issei, possible children, possible grandchildren, a calm life. A life just you and me, Kuryuo said, the macabre smile gone from her face by now. She turned halfway around and looked Issei in the eyes. I love you, Issei, you know that, right? At her words, the boy nodded slowly. Then why don't we just leave now? Kuryuo's words were like an ultimatum to Issei. Although the poor boy had said all those words, he was actually imagining an ideal future. He knew that a future with Kuryuo, an unstable girl who seemed to have healed over the last few weeks, would be anything but ideal, yet he looked her in the eyes. A small lump formed in his throat. He really wanted to say yes, but something inside his mind told him it was a bad idea. Maybe that something was D-Drake. Issei blinked, staggered in his own place before smiling, pushed all those bad thoughts to the back of his mind, looked at Kuryuo with bright eyes, and slowly nodded his head, ignoring that part of him that refused. Chapter 74, Attacks in Hokkaido. More than 1,000 reincarnated by Edo Tensei and enhanced with senjutsu charged toward Hokkaido at high speed, moving through a vast forest like small planes, causing destruction wherever they passed. Behind them all, Orochimaru watched with a smile. Once the spread begins, it will be like those zombie novels, don't you think? Orochimaru spoke as he jumped from tree branch to tree branch at high speed. The person next to him was none other than Lord Phoenix, the patriarch of the Phoenix family of the underworld who had been killed and then revived, his body enhanced with senjutsu, and had finally reached the level of a demon lord in power. HMPH. Lord Phoenix snorted in dissatisfaction, shook his head slightly to look at the snake, and smiled. You were a disgusting white snake, but that was fine, even then you were intimidating. But now, look at yourself, Lord Phoenix said, finally a bright smile appearing on his face. Ha 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 ha, Patriarch Phoenix's almost frenzied laughter could be heard within a radius of several hundred meters. Now you look like a damn multicolored snake. Ha 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 ha. He couldn't help but mock Orochimaru's greenish-yellow appearance. Tell me, what are you going to do, little snake? Are you going to dance to destroy us demons? Lord Phoenix shouted, his voice full of sarcasm. However, Orochimaru simply looked at him with a half-smile on his face, waited for the revived demon to finish laughing, and moved his lips. Are you done? He asked. Lord Phoenix closed his mouth and simply shook his head. Lord Serzetz is too powerful. He is the most powerful of the three factions. Not even Michael together with the other archangels, and helped by Azazel could defeat him. Lord Phoenix was confident, smiling arrogantly and shaking his head as if he had seen a child trying to hit an adult. You're finished, Orochimaru. Lord Serzetz will eliminate you, and you won't be able to get out of this. The power he has with destruction is incredible, Lord Phoenix said, then looked back at Orochimaru, stupid. The snake stood there staring ahead for a moment, his face full of seriousness. Azazel said the same thing, but I don't believe it. In any case, if something bad happens, I can always escape or use my ace in the hole." His voice sounded calm. "Lord Orochimaru, a powerful being is heading towards us at great speed." A voice sounded near Orochimaru's ear. He began to use his enhanced sage mode to sense the existences in the distance, and a moment later he couldn't help but smile. The snake frowned, quickly made several hand seals, and controlled one of the revived beings near Vali at the front. Further ahead, in front of all the revived ones, HMPH, a demon controlled by Orochimaru, frowned, quickened his pace to catch up with Vali, and once he was close, he spoke loudly. "I feel that an old friend has discovered us and is approaching at high speed." The controlled demon smiled brightly. "Do you think you're powerful? The one coming is really cunning as well as powerful. I'll let you deal with him." The controlled demon seemed to laugh slightly after speaking. However, Vali did not look back at any point. He simply narrowed his eyes, looked ahead, and sensed a powerful aura approaching at great speed in the distance. "With the improvement of Senjutsu, our abilities have more than doubled, but don't be overconfident. I sense a powerful aura that should be at least at the intermediate demon lord level." Albion spoke in Vali's mind, reminding him to be careful. "HMPH, I understand." Vali spoke, quickening his pace to meet the enemy, leaving Orochimaru's revived followers behind. "Good," Vali muttered. The magic within his body began to awaken. 2 big blue wings appeared behind him, majestic and large. They began to flap. In the middle of the great forest, the animals raised their heads, looked up at the sky, and, almost sensing something evil, ran away from Vali's position. Meanwhile, on the other side, Itachi Uchiha had finished confirming the establishment of Beelzebub's Demon Legion in Kyoto, so he quickly began transporting himself between prefectures, always using his ability to sense chakra in case he found Orochimaru. Finally, at noon and after Beelzebub's report, he received news of strange magical movements hundreds of miles away in the great forest next to Hokkaido. He flew quickly towards the forest, and the closer he got to the center, the more he could feel that something was wrong. "Itachi, the magical currents a couple dozen miles from your position are in complete chaos. If it's an enemy, I need you to stop them immediately," Beelzebub reported through a small communication circle. Itachi nodded slowly and continued flying through the forest. He couldn't help but notice some strange patterns in the forest. The trees seemed irregular, and the animals were also quite strange. With his own eyes, he saw a small gazelle kill a lion before devouring it. The ninja narrowed his eyes at this scene, but continued onward according to Beelzebub's orders. Then, a few moments later, he noticed something different in the air. It felt heavy, and the animals were fleeing without any apparent direction. He focused his gaze on the distant mountains, where a strange spot in the distance was becoming increasingly visible. "Itachi, according to my boys, someone with a great deal of magic is heading your way. Apparently, he is the enemy's envoy sent to deal with you. Try to see if you can defeat him and extract information from him. If not, just return to Kyoto." Beelzebub spoke again through the communication circle. "Understood," Itachi said, stopping in his tracks with his enormous wings flapping behind him. The enemy would not be long in arriving. For some reason, the ninja raised his hand to look at it. It was trembling slightly, and his body felt ecstatic as a chill ran through his skin. He opened his eyes in surprise. It had been a long time since he had felt this kind of sensation. Normally, this happened when he was about to face someone powerful. "Sharingan," Itachi didn't hesitate and activated his Sharingan. He watched as a boy with white hair and a slightly greenish tint, a little older than him, approached at great speed in the distance. The boy had green skin, which was strange. The boy also looked back at him from a distance. It seemed that he felt Itachi's eyes on him. The boy smiled brightly before charging with more force. His speed increased rapidly. In a few seconds, he would be in front of the ninja. "Desperate, are you going to fight without even talking first? It reminds me of that shark." Itachi sighed with some dissatisfaction. He did not put himself on guard, instead simply waiting with his arms in his pockets for Vali's arrival. Black clouds began to gather in the sky. Below, on the ground, the forest was shaking slightly. All the land animals were fleeing from the place where Itachi was flying overhead. The birds rose and desperately took flight, flying away from the area. The ninja observed this. It seemed that this would not be a peaceful day. While this was happening, Beelzebub had already cast a new spell, a kind of video communication portal near Itachi, to transmit their battle to the underworld and the human world. In the human world, the screens went dark again before the image of a green-haired man appeared. "Gentlemen, we thank the humans who gave their vote of confidence and began to join our demonic peerages. However, there are still many skeptics among you, which is why today we will present the battle of one of the most powerful demons against our enemy." With that said, the image on the screens changed to show Itachi flying in the sky, calmly awaiting Volley's arrival. The video was shown around the world. In countries where presidents had remained silent, reluctant to confirm or deny Surzech's statements in his previous appearance, some people didn't believe what was happening. They thought it was all a joke by some company or government. In Europe, everyone was watching the broadcast of Itachi flying through the sky, and many girls couldn't help but blush as they whispered a few words. "Hey, do you think when all this magic madness is over, this guy will be on OnlyFans?" A European girl couldn't help but ask her friend as she looked at her cell phone. "I don't know, but that would be nice." The other girl licked her lips with a perverted smile. Meanwhile, in Hokkaido, where the demons had appeared, people were quick to believe what was happening and looked at their devices seriously. Chapter 75, Problems in Kuoh. "Brother, do you think that?" A man in the middle of the road, with his car completely parked in the middle of it, narrowed his eyes and asked himself in complete shock. His older brother in the passenger seat also looked at the man's cell phone with a stern expression. Now that the demons have appeared and their existence has been confirmed, this must be true. "I think it's best to go home and take refuge for a few days," said the brother, before letting out a slight sigh. He was about to take out a cigarette to smoke when he heard a scream in the distance. "Gah!" The scream of a girl quickly caught the attention of the two men. Almost instinctively, the driver put his cell phone on the dashboard and began to drive quickly in the direction of the scream. To no one's surprise, the road was empty even at this hour of the night. The people who were normally here with their cars were at home with their families, sharing their concerns about the latest events. The car accelerated, skidding on the road, and turned sharply at a corner. It didn't take long to reach the place where the scream had come from. "Hey!" the driver shouted. He was about to ask if everything was okay when he saw a figure suddenly appear in the sky. "Brother, look at..." The man reached out to get his brother's attention, but his hand didn't find what it was looking for. "Brother?" he wondered, quickly turning his head to look at his brother. The man remained silent, his eyes wide open. His brother was there with his head completely pierced by a black construction rod. He breathed heavily, his eyes dilated. He was about to scream when a hand grabbed him by the neck, and as soon as he realized it, his life was over. "Ha ha ha, I've always wanted to do this to these filthy creatures." The entity that killed the man, a demon revived by Edo Tensei, shouted with a smile, "Ha ha ha ha." He burst out laughing before taking a scroll out of his pocket, sealing the bodies of these two inside the scroll, and continuing his hunt. Orochimaru's more than 1,000 reincarnated beings had already arrived in Hokkaido. They divided into small teams of 5, and some, like the demon mentioned above, preferred to act alone. The more organized teams of 5 began the attack. The first to advance unleashed attacks of all kinds to attract attention. The teams in the middle collected human corpses, and the team at the rear was in charge of keeping watch and killing any fish that had slipped through the net. Meanwhile, Orochimaru, not far away, watched all this through his connection with the revived. In his mind, several scenes appeared one after another. One where a demon murdered a family, another where a fallen angel was sealing the corpses of a group of people, and another where demons attacked everything they saw. While this was happening, in the Yokai Sanctuary, Beelzebub watched Itachi's transmission seriously, his slightly narrowed eyes full of doubt, all while his breathing was completely calm. "What exactly is that guy?" Beelzebub asked himself. The intelligence team had warned him that the accumulation of magic belonged to a supernatural being, more precisely a mixture of human, demon, and something else that the intelligence squadron could not decipher. Beelzebub was about to analyze the existence that was suddenly arriving when a communication circle appeared near his ear. "Lord Beelzebub, this is urgent. Hundreds of strange beings have appeared in Hokkaido and have begun slaughtering people," came the desperate voice of a demon scientist. Ajuka quickly stood up and suddenly opened his mouth. "Give me the full report," he demanded, but all he heard was noise, screams, and the sound of something strange coming from the communication circle. Ajuka narrowed his eyes and tried again to demand an answer when a voice sounded from the other side of the communication circle. "Kyukuku, hello little Ajuka, it's been a while since we spoke. I hope it's not too disrespectful to you that I kill these kids from the lab." The familiar voice of the snake sounded on the other side of the communication circle. The demon narrowed his eyes tightly. Some of his power was released, exerting great pressure on the Yokai temple and causing cracks to spread across the floor. "Orochimaru?" Ajuka muttered before bringing a hand to his forehead. "El Lord Beelzebub, my F family." The demon, who had been talking to himself, stuttered, then his scream was heard, and finally the communication circle disappeared. Ajuka stood there rubbing his forehead for a moment, various thoughts invading his mind. He raised his head with concern, controlled his aura, ceasing to exert pressure on the Yokai temple, and finally conjured a transport circle. "Attacking so suddenly, huh?" Beelzebub muttered with disdain. He entered the circle and was ready to go to Hokkaido to see Orochimaru in person. Just after Ajuka disappeared from the room, several Yokai suddenly knocked on the door. "Lord Beelzebub?" Their cries outside sounded desperate. Meanwhile, in the forest on the side of Hokkaido, Itachi stared sternly at the white-haired, almost yellowish-haired man who was charging towards him at great speed. He raised his hand slightly and mobilized his chakra, greatly strengthening his body. "I'm here," Vali shouted with a smile. He quickly raised his fist as he increased his speed towards Itachi, his eyes frantic and his body ready for battle. The ninja, on the other hand, calmly bent his body slightly, his eyes with the 3 Tamo Sharingan activated shining in the sunlight. "I should be able to lead him into some kind of illusion, but I need to move my body a little," he muttered softly, a small smile spreading across his face. The ninja's breathing calmed down. He calmly watched as the demon approached, and when the guy was close to him, he forcefully moved his fist forward. Vali also forcefully moved his fist in the direction of Itachi's. Blow. Blow. The 2 fists collided, generating a powerful crash almost instantly, as if 2 large planets had collided, sending out a powerful shock wave in the form of wind that shook the branches of the trees below them with force. The impact of their fists felt like 2 thunderclaps colliding, and the people watching this through their devices opened their eyes in surprise. "He's strong," Itachi thought as his fist collided with Vali's. He could feel the other's powerful physical strength through that fist pressing against him. In the sky, Itachi quickly backed up several meters, leaving Vali with his fist extended in the same position. "Wow, that physical strength is truly worthy of a demon lord," Vali said with some sarcasm hidden in his voice. "I haven't even taken off my full armor and you're already backing away? Ha!" he thought arrogantly in his mind before getting into attack position. However, Itachi remained calm, looked at the boy with narrowed, stern eyes before shaking his head. "Physical combat is not my thing. I'm sorry about that. It seems you are at a disadvantage," he said, shaking his head and shrugging his shoulders, looking at the guy with a face full of absurd kindness. Vali saw this and immediately narrowed his eyes, biting his lower lip. "Tusk, what do you think?" he muttered with dissatisfaction before narrowing his eyes. "I am Vali, the White Dragon Emperor. You can't even stop a punch from me in my base state, and you still think you can make that stupid face." Vali seemed furious at Itachi's simple sentence. "Haha, Vali, the White Dragon Emperor, that's stupid. Why don't we try playing this my way?" Itachi sneered, and in the next moment, he locked eyes with Vali. Chapter 76, The Value of Ranged Combat. Vali narrowed his eyes and looked at Itachi as if he were looking at a dead man. Itachi's words pierced his heart like a drill, bringing several unpleasant feelings to his mind. "You!" Vali clenched his teeth in anger. Kid, calm down, you're overreacting to a few simple words, something's not right. Albion muttered hurriedly inside Volley's mind, but was ignored by the latter. What's your damn name? Volley demanded with a serious face and a completely stern expression, looking as if he was about to attack the ninja. My name, Itachi Uchiha, he said with a calm expression. My name is Volley Lucifer, and today I'm going to kill you, understand? Volley said as he narrowed his eyes, gave a half-smile, got into a battle stance, and turned his head slightly, taunting the ninja. On the other hand, Itachi simply watched this with a slight smile. Do you know why, despite your strength, you will probably lose to me? He said, still maintaining a calm and upright posture, blinking slightly to the bewilderment of Volley, who looked at him cautiously. In his mind, Volley had already thought of several ways to attack Itachi, how he might react to his attacks, or how he might subdue him. However, the demon in front of him seemed to be simply standing there, calm, quiet, standing in his own position almost without moving, which confused him. Doesn't he know what it means to be a white dragon emperor? He wondered to himself. However, Itachi remained calm, took a step forward as if standing on a visible platform, and in the next moment appeared in front of Volley. This is why, Volley, I am a strategic ninja, not a beast of burden who only fights with fists and kicks, Itachi said, extending his hand slightly to try to touch Volley's hair. The white dragon emperor's eyes opened in surprise, his mind stopped for a moment. Albion was muttering some crazy things in his mind, and he had a look of absolute surprise on his face. What? He almost muttered in fear. Itachi had practically disappeared and reappeared in front of him in a couple of movements. He couldn't predict it, he didn't see his quick movements. For him, it was as if his mind had fallen asleep for a few seconds, and in fact, that was the case. Itachi had applied a genjutsu, lasting less than a second, to distract Volley, which gave him enough time to move at high speed and appear in front of him, bewildering him. To Volley, Itachi appeared in front of him without him noticing. The surprise of this brought total and absolute shock to his mind, yet his body reacted instinctively, retreating at high speed. Volley retreated several dozen meters in just a second, his face still full of absolute surprise, unable to stop focusing on Itachi. Why? He wondered as he tried to calm his heavy breathing. Kid, calm down, I know exactly what's going on, Albion was about to explain when Volley grabbed his head in anger. Impossible, you can't be faster than me, he shouted before condensing a sword in his right hand. You're not faster, he shouted before charging forward with force, but once again, Itachi disappeared from his spot and appeared above him. Why don't you just accept it? Big fireball. The ninja's voice sounded like torment inside Volley's mind, and in the next moment, a powerful fireball hit him in the back. Grag, Volley screamed in pain. Itachi's great fireball had been completely enhanced after he became a special demon, reaching Madara's level. Struck by the large fireball, Volley fell several hundred meters, the wings on his back slightly cracked, his eyes lost as he stared at the ground. More than Itachi's strength, it was simply the fact that he had surprised him, and his control over illusions that disturbed him mentally. Using genjutsu to cause fear seems to be profitable. Itachi smiled slightly. It was the first time since becoming a special demon that he could truly test how strong he was and use his genjutsu in ways other than the classic illusion. Genjutsu, being the connection of the mind to the five senses, can also influence by generating all kinds of emotions. What Itachi is currently doing is disturbing Volley's mental stability through this and causing him to lose control. Volley regained his composure in the air hundreds of meters below Itachi, his slightly empty eyes observing the forest below him, observing the plants, the trees devoid of animals, and everything else. His eyes blinked, unable to help but dilate. Kid, the enemy is using a strange ability to influence your mind, you have to resist. Albion reminded him again, but Volley seemed completely lost in his thoughts. Images flashed through his mind of being raised under intensive training, the contempt of the pure demons, the absence of his parents, and living under strict military order. All of this had left slight scars on his mind, which he had suppressed under his image of a powerful and independent man. Volley composed himself in the air, touched one side of his face and narrowed his eyes, staring into the apparent void in front of him. "Are you done thinking about yourself?" Itachi muttered close to him. He was about to end all this and kill Vali or seal him away. He moved his hands, ready to launch his attack, when he heard Vali's voice. "This is because of your influence, right? You entered my mind to make all this happen, right?" Vali looked into Itachi Uchiha's strange eyes. He felt something strange in those eyes. The concentration of that energy called chakra in those eyes was abundant. And then he understood. He remembered Orochimaru's words from a few days earlier. "Is this the ability of your Sharingan?" Vali guessed. Seeing that Itachi did not respond, he smiled slightly. "I should have guessed. It's not normal for me to get angry at a few simple words or to feel this way. You are." He paused, contemplating the ninja's beautiful face for a moment. "You're completely heartless, do you know that? Attacking your enemy's mind, hahaha, that's scary, seriously scary," he said to himself before smiling brightly. "And what are you going to do? You're already defeated," Itachi said, waiting to see what else this boy had to oppose him. For his part, Vali smiled brightly. What I've always done since childhood. I'm going to fight." Vali shouted loudly, determined, a bright smile spreading across his face before he spread his hands. The next moment, a large armor covered Vali's entire body, including his face. His two large wings behind him grew larger, and a powerful magic dozens of times more powerful than before was released. Itachi felt the sudden change, opened his eyes in surprise, and was about to try to cast a genjutsu when he was met with a direct attack. "Divide," the guy shouted, and Itachi felt his power drain away enormously in just an instant. "What?" The ninja opened his eyes before seeing Vali in his armor launch a powerful punch in his direction. The powerful fist struck Itachi's body, but only resulted in the ninja exploding into a smoke bomb and leaving a log behind him, having used the body replacement jutsu. "Did he drain half my power?" Itachi wondered in the distance as he narrowed his eyes, but a slight clarity invaded his body. "No, it wasn't half, but almost," he muttered. In fact, his special demon body was strange. The abundant magic in his body, gained thanks to being a special demon, was gradually diluting and transforming into chakra as time passed, because magic itself is only pure spiritual energy that, in ninjas, mixes with bodily energy to form chakra. Chapter 77, Striking with Some Force. Powerful shock waves were generated every time Vali moved his body. One of his fists was powerful enough to generate an immense shock wave, breaking the wind and attempting to strike Itachi. The ninja moved with agility. Each time Vali struck a blow against him, he exploded, having used the body replacement technique. And while this was happening, he carefully analyzed the movements of the White Dragon Emperor. "Divide," Albion's voice rang out again. Itachi felt his mental energy being drained constantly as before, but he noticed something different this time. The first time it was half of my total mental energy, now it was a quarter. Itachi narrowed his eyes, moved his hands with agility, and then blew hard, fire-style, great fireball. A huge fireball the size of a building traveling at high speed headed towards Vali. "HMPH, what is this?" Vali muttered, looking at the large fireball with curiosity. He didn't know what kind of magic it was, so he simply shook his head before charging fiercely through the large fireball. "Tusk, be careful!" Albion shouted in the boy's mind when he felt the suffocating heat of the huge fireball, but Vali ignored these words and continued to charge through the huge fireball with determination. "You can take away half of my mental energy with that move each time, but this half is proportional to the amount of mental energy I have, not the total." Itachi came to a quick conclusion, saying with a smile before suddenly closing his eyes. "Huh?" Vali, with his armor emitting some smoke and completely hot, finished passing through the large fireball. He watched Itachi closing his eyes, and a bad feeling washed over his mind, sending waves of strange thoughts to his soul. What is he doing? He wondered, the sudden feeling of danger in his heart preventing him from continuing to move forward to attack. Instead, he kept his guard up in his own place. Suddenly, the atmosphere became a little heavier, the air warmed slightly, and black clouds began to gather in the sky. Vali felt it, his hair stood on end, and he watched with almost fear as Itachi slowly opened his eyes. Albion was about to say something, but remained silent. In Volley's mind, he watched Itachi with genuine curiosity. He was stunned in a sense, completely surprised by the strange feeling that weighed on his soul. "Kid, is that it?" Albion murmured inside his mind, but Volley did not answer him. Instead, he frowned deeply. "Mangekyo Sharingan?" he murmured. He had heard Orochimaru talk about this. The image of that snake telling him that when Itachi activates the Mangekyo, he almost becomes another person flashed through his mind. Volley stood guard, watching Itachi closely. He was about to make his first move when, once again, a completely sudden sensation invaded his body with ferocity. Volley's eyes opened wide, dilating in a couple of moments. Almost purely on instinct, he moved fiercely to the right. And right where he had been standing, a strange black fire appeared, covering a large area. Volley looked to the side, watching this with strange eyes. He watched the strange black fire slowly disappear into the air and then quickly looked back at Itachi. "What the hell is that?" he demanded, but Itachi remained calm. "I can see that using Amaterasu no longer has the same effect on me, my eyesight doesn't deteriorate, and I don't bleed." The ninja smiled slightly, looking down at Volley like a man who despises another. Volley became enraged. "Tusk, do you think you're so great just because you have those strange eyes? HMPH. He spat with some anger. "You can be sure I'll rip those red eyes out of your damn face." A sudden smile flooded his face as he accelerated forward at great speed. "However, are you capable of doing that?" Itachi smiled suddenly, this time focusing on Volley again. "Amaterasu." Once again, the White Dragon Emperor dodged with particular haste. Itachi channeled his attacks again, and Volley dodged again and again and again. It wasn't until he shouted "Divide" again that Itachi stopped attacking with just one ability. His movement pattern is always the same. He moves to the right and always slightly upward. His right foot moves before his left. "Good," he muttered to himself before pausing for a moment. Volley noticed this, quickly raised his head, and looked at Itachi with his two bright eyes. Up until this point, he had only been dodging and had not had time to concentrate on anything else. Something told him that black fire should not hit him under any circumstances. Has he stopped? He asked himself quietly, but the next moment he felt that strange danger again and smiled softly. "Is that all you can do? You'll die for exhausting your magic before this fight is over," Volley said as he moved to the right again and slightly upward. But when he looked back at Itachi, he was no longer there. In fact, nothing in the world remained there. "What?" Volley was surprised. He quickly looked both ways, but at that moment he found himself in a desert. His armor had disappeared, and Albion seemed to have evaporated from his mind. "The possessors of sacred gear are a bit like the Jinchuriki of my previous world. Do you know that?" Itachi murmured, only his face materializing in front of Volley, as if crows formed the lower edges of his neck, ending in them. Volley didn't understand. He quickly tried to communicate with Albion, but was unsuccessful. "Don't try to communicate with the dragon hidden inside you. He is also under my illusion," Itachi said calmly. "Now, why don't you tell me what Orochimaru plans to do?" the ninja asked calmly, but Volley, who was shaking his head erratically, suddenly smiled. Hahaha, do you think a shitty illusion can stop me? I'll get out of this place in just a moment," he said before concentrating, trying to mobilize his magic, trying to mobilize his physical strength, but none of it worked. "Maybe if it were the me before I became a special demon, you would have managed to escape my illusion, but now it's different. The Tsukuyomi I can wield is dozens of times more powerful than the one I used to use, and escaping at this moment is almost impossible," the ninja said quietly. "You seem very proud of your power. Why don't we try something nice?" Itachi said. The next moment, a small kunai began to slowly pass over Volley's face, cutting into his skin and slicing off pieces of it continuously. "Grog!" Volley's scream was heard as Itachi began to skin his face, then his arms, and finally his body. Hours must have passed during all this, yet Volley, who should have died from the pain, regained consciousness, and his body returned to normal. "We still have plenty of time to play. Why don't you tell me about Orochimaru's plans?" the ninja asked again. Volley was breathing heavily. his eyes completely dilated as he stared at the desert floor beneath Itachi. His body was shaking as drool dripped from his mouth. "Fuck you," he shouted angrily and bit down hard, seemingly trying to show his powerful side, but to Itachi it was like a challenge. "Then let's continue playing. After all, in this place, time passes hundreds of times slower than in the outside world. We can repeat this tens of thousands of times." Volley's face paled when he heard these words. He looked ahead, sweat pouring down his face. He was about to say something when he felt a sudden pain again. Chapter 78, Volley Unleashed. After several days in the illusion world, Volley was finally completely mentally broken, and he revealed everything he knew about Orochimaru. The snake's plan was to connect the ninja world with this world, causing the two worlds to connect through a giant portal. To do this, he needed to break through the heaven to reach the highest level and cause the heaven to explode, thus achieving a space-time distortion. According to Volley, Orochimaru would first have to meet certain requirements to be able to face the demons and angels. To do this, he was capturing all kinds of beings and sealing their bodies. His goal was to grow an artificial world tree and use it to absorb all the humans in the world and finally consume the fruit of the god tree. But this made no sense to Itachi. The humans of this world did not have the spiritual energy or chakra nodes to absorb his energy. However, seeing the trembling Volley in front of him, tied to a cross, he knew that what he said was true. "Have you found a way to grow the world tree with only physical energy?" Itachi wondered to himself. After all, if there was one thing the humans of this world had, it was physical energy. Itachi was about to undo the genjutsu and kill Volley when he heard a strange voice coming from Volley. "Kyukuku, Itachi-kun, it seems you have become more powerful, however, don't think that's all this little one has. You see, it's not yet time for you to interfere. You will have your place in the new world very soon." Volley had suddenly raised his head, his white eyes staring at Itachi as the snake's voice came out of his mouth. "HMPH," Itachi muttered softly, narrowing his eyes. How is it possible that Orochimaru can take control of Volley's body when he is in his genjutsu? He was about to ask when his genjutsu was suddenly broken. In the real world, Itachi opened his eyes and quickly focused his gaze on Volley, not far from him. He was about to launch an attack when he saw Volley's body change rapidly. "Divide," Albion's voice rang out inside Volley's body, and Itachi lost half of his mental energy again. Just a moment later, a powerful scream was heard throughout the place. Volley's armor began to change suddenly, growing like foam. His legs split into four, and a large amount of magic concentrated around him. "Itachi, I am Beelzebub. We have received a sudden attack from Orochimaru in Hokkaido. I tried to stop him, but he is too elusive. At least 90% of the humans and most of my demons in Hokkaido have been eliminated, and their bodies have been stolen. An interference sounded from the other side, catching Itachi's attention. "I'm fighting right now. I can win, but it will take time. Orochimaru has abilities that are too strange and difficult to counter, even for me. Can you come back soon?" Ajuka's voice sounded hurried. Itachi understood. It seemed that something had happened throughout Hokkaido. Then the ninja quickly raised his head, narrowing his eyes as the magic in Volley's body continued to increase at a rapid pace. His armor changed, and the sky was completely covered by black clouds that occasionally let out thunder. "We can't continue playing in this place." The ninja muttered under his breath, narrowing his eyes, taking a deep breath, and clasping his palms together tightly. A sudden macabre smile appeared on his face as he looked maliciously at Volley in the sky. "Before, I didn't have enough chakra to use it to its full potential, but now, why don't I try it?" Itachi shouted, his physical strength mixing with his mental strength to continuously form large amounts of chakra. Even from a distance, one could feel Itachi's presence suddenly growing in power. Near Kyoto, as Serafal responded to Ajuka's call for help, she couldn't help but stop and look in a specific direction. "The currents of magical energy are overflowing in that place, She paled, noticing how an existence in the distance that seemed to be Itachi kept growing more powerful and noticeable. Her face was hit by a sudden wind that moved her hair. Is this going to surpass even the demon kings being close to the power released by Surzets? She wondered before shaking her head and continuing onward with her group of elite demons in the direction of Hokkaido. On the battlefield, Vali felt a sudden pain. He had lost his mind. The torture of what seemed like days of Itachi continually flaying him alive shattered his sanity, and he could only think of memories from the past. Ha 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 ha. Vali laughed softly in his mind, beginning to remember his life in the underworld where he was discriminated against, his moments of solitude, his mother's discipline, the reason he continued to grow stronger, and his encounter with Itachi. He remembered how Orochimaru had found him, how he had offered him and let him see a world beyond what was possible according to his understanding of the world, and he believed him. Vali lowered his head, staggered, looked ahead, and almost seemed to see a large screen where Itachi was. A strange existence formed by a kind of red energy that formed a warrior seemed to begin to cover him. He narrowed his eyes, wanting to get out and fight, but it was impossible. Orochimaru had taken control of his body. Susanoo, Itachi murmured. Finally, in another world, he managed to summon a Susanoo 50 meters tall, which took the form of a samurai with a large sword with a gourd-shaped hilt and a round shield, the Totsuka sword and the Yata shield. His face was covered by a mask, while on his forehead was something like a space where Itachi was present. The ninja looked at all this with mixed feelings. Finally, after becoming a special demon, he had managed to summon a full-body Susanoo. Vali in the sky had transformed into a 10-meter-tall dragon beast, similar to a white android dragon with transparent blue wings. The dragon roared with rage, generating powerful waves of wind that shook the forest, and looked at Itachi's Susanoo with dangerous eyes. The dragon suddenly opened its mouth, and a large ball of energy formed in its jaws. Enough magic to destroy an entire city formed in less than a second, and continued to increase. Is this some kind of released Jinchuriki form? Itachi wondered in his mind, but he decided to end this once and for all. The ninja swung his Totsuka sword fiercely forward, but the dragon managed to dodge with almost sudden ease. The magic ball in its jaws continued to accumulate, seemingly determined to launch an attack powerful enough to destroy everything within hundreds of miles. Itachi, however, smiled and continued attacking with the Totsuka sword as the dragon dodged. Your patterns are erratic, as if you were dodging by instinct, however. Itachi smiled, and the dragon let out a loud roar as the ninja slightly raised the Yata shield. Chapter 79, Finally Defeated. Vali, in his mental world, tried to move with force, tried to recover, tried to escape to the outside world where Itachi constantly attacked his self controlled by Orochimaru. However, no matter how hard he tried, it was impossible for him to regain control over his body, now plunged into madness. He raised his head, smiled slightly, and looked at the screen in front of him with a deep fear rising up his spine. Is it over? He asked himself in a low voice. He could tell, he could see it through the screen in front of him. Itachi was simply playing with his controlled self. He blinked a couple of times, looked at the image on the screen, and before he could do anything, the sword Itachi was holding pierced his body controlled by Orochimaru. A sudden feeling passed through his mind, cornered his soul, melted into his body like soda in a glass of alcohol, and suddenly Vali lowered his head. Have I lost? He wondered, his life passing before his eyes, before his mind, before his imminent disappearance. In the outside world. Is that all? I really thought there would be something more interesting. Itachi muttered calmly. Totsuka had pierced the white dragon's body, and little by little, the white dragon's body began to melt into a liquid that returned to Totsuka's hilt. Itachi blinked. Grag! Albion's painful scream along with Vali's could be heard coming from the dragon's body, but that only lasted a moment before they were completely absorbed by Totsuka. At the end of their battle, Vali couldn't help but look at Itachi one last time. He thought he saw the shadow of something else behind the ninja, and his eyes narrowed. Damn you, he cursed one last time. Meanwhile, Albion was simply speechless. He didn't beg, he didn't speak, he didn't curse, he just stood there, screaming and being absorbed by Totsuka. In Hokkaido. Ice explosion. Seraphal mobilized her enormous amount of magic, and in the next moment, the dozens of people revived by Edo Tensei were frozen until they were crispy. The attacks have been too intense in such a short period of time. I fear that the humans in Hokkaido have been almost completely wiped out, and at least a quarter of the demon legion commanded by Lord Beelzebub is missing. A high-ranking demon general said seriously behind Seraphal. Huh? Seraphal narrowed her eyes and bit her lower lip as she looked at the disaster around her. Several buildings had collided, houses were on fire, cars were burning here and there. The scene itself was similar to an apocalypse. The demon lady was about to curse when a communication circle appeared next to her ear. Seraphal, I have managed to stop the advance of Orochimaru's main squadron, and he has now retreated. How are you doing over there? Beelzebub asked, a certain tone of calm and exhaustion audible in his voice. For her part, Seraphal breathed a sigh of relief. I've captured a few in ice tombs. I think you could. She didn't finish her sentence. The revived ones she had imprisoned in ice disappeared, leaving a small explosion behind. Huh? She narrowed her eyes and quickly checked all the undead she had captured, but all she saw were mounds of ice with empty spaces inside. Indeed, all the undead had disappeared. A slight feeling of annoyance crossed Seraphal's heart. She clenched her teeth, kicked the ground hard as she shouted, "Damn it!" before releasing a large part of her aura. Seraphal, Ajuka was completely ignored by Seraphal. Meanwhile, at the hidden base and one of the fallen angels. It's been a while since we were in the house father built for us, Azazel murmured, looking at the giant door in front of him with mixed emotions in his heart. The enormous door in front of him, measuring over 100 meters high and 100 meters wide, decorated with intricate golden patterns and carved with beautiful inlays, gave off a unique feeling. The thousands of fallen angels behind him also looked at that door with bright eyes, hopeful and full of vitality, as if they were trying to open that door with their gazes alone. Not long after, a rather peculiar white zetsu began to emerge from the ground, bearing a strange resemblance to aloe vera. The results of Lord Orochimaru's raid are ready, Lord Azazel, the white zetsu said respectfully, tilting his head to look at the leader of the fallen angels with a calm gaze. Lord Vali has been defeated and sealed in the Totsuka sword by Itachi Uchiha. It's a shame, as he had reached a level far higher than many powerful people. However, we have good news. Lord Orochimaru has collected more than 100,000 human and demon souls ready to serve as fertilizer for the world tree. The white zetsu recounted the outcome of the battle between Vali and Orochimaru. A strange feeling of guilt pierced Azazel's heart when he heard the white zetsu's words, but just as he was about to speak, the white zetsu opened his mouth again. With the collection of more than 100,000 beings, the first stage is complete. Soon we will be able to plant the tree of the world and invade the heavens, Lord Azazel. Isn't this good news? White zetsu laughed loudly, but Azazel said nothing. Instead, he simply sighed lightly. It will be good news when we manage to regain the place that Father gave us, and that belongs to us by genuine right. Azazel said, however, the white zetsu disagreed, almost opening his mouth to refute when another person began to emerge from the ground. The head with green hair and yellowish-green skin, classic of Orochimaru's new appearance. Kyukuku, it's true, it won't be good news until little Azazel regains what is rightfully his. Orochimaru's annoying and somewhat terrifying voice rang out, bringing a strange sense of panic to the hearts of many fallen angels. For now, we just need a little time to begin cultivating the world tree. Orochimaru let out a slight chuckle. Come on, it's not like you had to sacrifice much. Of course, your help is totally appreciated, you damn snake. Azazel grumbled, Vali was a good guy, you know. The words of the leader of the fallen angels only made Orochimaru's smile grow even brighter. He didn't stand a chance. He was facing Itachi. His fate was sealed from the moment Itachi-kun appeared on the battlefield. Chapter 80, Strange Decisions. Whatever the outcome, Vali's defeat is a great loss for us, the fallen angels, Orochimaru. If this plan fails, we will all be completely wiped out of existence. Azazel narrowed his eyes as he watched the snake approach the great gate of heaven. I had never heard of such strange beings as you in my original world. All there was chakra and strange gods, but now? The snake smiled slightly before sighing, his palm touching the great gate and feeling its texture. It's incredible, don't you think? Well, for you this is normal, you were born on the other side, in heaven, but for me it's something new, something to discover, something my mind can't stop thinking about. Orochimaru licked his lips as he murmured with a slight smile. Azazel, on the other hand, simply stared at the snake's sword with a peculiar look. And don't dream too much about heaven. What's inside belongs to the fallen angels, not you. You belong to another world, understand? The leader of the fallen angels made things clear. It's perfectly understood, Azazel. For now, let's just focus on the most important thing. I'm going to plant the world tree here, near the entrance to heaven. This will take a few days, so I need your demons to be on the lookout in case anyone arrives, Orochimaru said, slowly walking away from the giant gate. Azazel nodded his head a couple of times as he narrowed his eyes. He had never had a good feeling about this guy. He had never completely earned his trust, and yet here he was, cooperating with him as if they both trusted each other with their lives. My boys revived by Ito-tensei will also be present, so please don't cause any trouble with each other. The snake's last words sounded strange, with something threatening hidden in them. Azazel sensed it and looked back at Orochimaru's back as he hesitated over his latest decisions. My lord, Pename approached the leader. She also looked at Snake's back with some doubts in her heart. She didn't know exactly what this guy wanted, who had appeared out of nowhere one day trying to form an alliance with the fallen angels. Azazel shook his head. We have come this far thanks to Orochimaru. If we don't continue, not only will we lose his help, but the demons and angels will end up killing us. Penemu was about to refute him. She wanted to say something, but she couldn't. She knew that her leader's words were true. They had allied themselves with Orochimaru to recover heaven and live there, but had that been the best decision? Penemu looked at the more than 1,000 fallen angels present with shining eyes. Her mouth opened and closed several times like a fish out of water. She seemed to be trying to say something, but no words came out of her mouth. Perhaps this is the fate you wove for us, Father, Penemu murmured before quickly shaking her head. The broadcast had ended a few moments ago. The broadcast showing Itachi's battle against Vali had left more than half the world with their mouths agape. In fact, although there were still people who doubted whether the latest news about demons and all supernatural beings really existed in the world, everyone had to accept that Itachi's fight against Vali looked so real that many of them were seriously beginning to believe it. Soon, news would spread that Hokkaido Prefecture in Japan had been completely ravaged by hundreds of strange creatures, including humans, angels, and fallen angels, which would make everyone believe Surzech's story. While that was happening in Kuoh, Hyoudou Issei was packing his bags. He was in his room, watching Kuryu fold some clothes and put them in a suitcase. His eyes narrowed, his mind racing with different thoughts, and his expression couldn't have been more confused at that moment. Am I really going to abandon everything to go live in a remote place with this girl? What happened to being the king of the harem? What about everything else? He wondered, squeezing the clothes in his hands a little harder before Kuryu looked back at him. She smiled genuinely, causing a strange feeling of surprise to reflect on Issei's face. The boy narrowed his eyes, remembering Itachi's words from some time ago about making a decision, about finally deciding what to do with his life. It seemed that this would be one of the most important decisions for him, so he looked Kuryu in the eyes. Several thoughts ran through his mind, from the need to try to tell her that. Various thoughts ran through his mind, from the need to try to tell her that he actually wanted a harem, to the simple and voracious need to delay the decision for another time. In fact, a strange feeling, like a mixture of various emotions, overwhelmed him. I'm here, as you can see, Kuryu, but you, Issei blinked. Is something wrong, dear? Kuryu approached him to hug him tightly. A life together, remember? Kuryu murmured, wrapping her arms around the boy's waist as she lifted her head, her eyes with white in her sclera shining slightly, her body trembling slightly, and the heat she emitted seemed to suffocate Issei's soul. A lifetime together is for life, even if it's stupid to say so. Issei, I think I've been a little rough on you. Drake spoke inside the boy's mind. I know I told you lately that I don't care which path you choose as long as you decide to train to defeat Albion. But D-Drake paused. I can feel it, Albion is gone. He's probably dead or not. I don't know. But the strangest thing is that his soul is no longer in this world, nor in the demonic world or the angelic world, so? The dragon sounded slightly tired. So I asked myself, I'm asking myself right now that Albion is gone, what am I going to do? D-Drake smiled slightly. I won't bother you anymore about training. I think I don't care anymore if you train or not. Albion is gone, there's no need to train. For now I'll just rest. If you need me I'll help you, but... There was a brief moment of silence. Issei stared at Kuoh and how she hugged him with such a peculiar emotion that it would have been impossible to describe. Make your decision, Issei. It's okay if you make a mistake, you can correct it later, or you can rebuild your life later, but unlike before, I don't know if you can continue to count on me. I need some time to think. D-Drake seemed confused to a certain extent. All I can say is that this girl, Kuoh, has been acting cute for the last few days, weeks, even months just to please you. She's weird, too weird. She watches you at night while you sleep. She watches you when you don't realize it. I've seen her sniff you from head to toe with a lost look in her eyes. Issei's eyes widened in surprise when he heard this. If you can handle this, then fine, it's your decision, but I can't guarantee that I'll be here. I might decide to leave your body, I don't know. I need to think about Albion and all that, so... Just make your decision, and if you make a mistake, you'll have time to fix it. D-Drake smiled genuinely, his words conveying to Issei a sense of calm and peace that he had never felt before. For now, I'm going to think about it. I won't talk to you for days, weeks, months, or maybe years, or maybe... Never again, so just make a decision and don't always be the one who can be something. D-Drake's voice gradually faded away until there was nothing left. A peculiar feeling of coldness and tingling spread throughout Issei's skin, wandering through his flesh to his bones and finally reaching his heart. He took a deep breath and let out a big sigh. Kuoh, Issei smiled. In fact, he already sensed that this girl was not mentally well. He knew it from the first moment he saw her making a scene in his room, but he chose to ignore those red flags. Let's do this together, Issei said. Somehow, he felt attracted to this girl's strange and even perverted behavior, her completely unhealthy jealousy, the way she stared at him so intently during the night, as D-Drake had said. If I'm wrong and end up hating you, then I'll just walk away from you, Issei thought to himself. A small cry mixed with a completely happy moan escaped Kuryu's mouth before she hugged him with all her might. Chapter 81, Morning in Hokkaido. Sometime later. This is fucking bullshit. Yasaka shouted and slammed her fist down on the table so hard that it broke, sending the various dishes on top of it crashing to the floor as a shockwave spread around her. She brought her hands to her face as she sobbed softly. My lady. The high-ranking yaokai near her didn't know what to say, she just stared at her leader with sad eyes. More than half of our yaokai in Hokkaido, along with Sun Wukong, were completely defeated, and not only that, their bodies were kidnapped by Orochimaru. Yasaka muttered with genuine pain, then narrowed her eyes and raised her head slightly to observe the temple around her. What the hell were Azazel and Seraphal doing? She demanded, almost shouting, her words filled with genuine resentment. My lady, Lord Azazel was fighting an elite team formed by Orochimaru, the revived Lord Phoenix, and a powerful angel, also revived, whose name I do not know. Yasaka shook her head slightly. Over the past few months, she had been losing too many yaokai at the hands of Orochimaru, and when Itachi suddenly came to form an alliance with the demons, she really thought that would put an end to the disappearances. However, according to the latest news, all of Hokkaido had been completely destroyed. Yasaka let out a big, restrained sigh. I'm sorry, I lost my temper. If even two of the demon lords can't deal with Orochimaru, how can we survive? She asked. After all, her power was nowhere near Seraphal's, not to mention Ajuka, who was completely superior to her in power. Yasaka sat down on a nearby chair as she looked at the completely destroyed table. She thought she saw Hokkaido reflected in those pieces of plates, wood, and other debris scattered on the floor. I was informed that Lord Uchiha fought against the White Dragon Emperor, who had reached Ajuka's raw power, but in the end, Lord Uchiha defeated him. The yaokai girl said with a slight smile. But that news did not cheer up the already depressed Yasaka. Suddenly, the atmosphere distorted slightly, and green and blue transport circles appeared not far away, and it wasn't long before Serafal and Ajuka emerged from those portals. We lost. Orochimaru has much more power and strange abilities than I thought. I couldn't face him as I should have. I'm sorry, Ajuka said with genuine guilt, leaning forward slightly as he spoke. I arrived a little late and couldn't be of much help. I'm sorry too, Serafal leaned forward, imitating Ajuka's actions. On the other hand, Yasuka said nothing. She stood watching the two for a moment, a slight, tired half-smile forming on her face. It doesn't matter, you did what you could. Although Hokkaido has been completely destroyed, it may serve to warn the world of Orochimaru's dangerousness. Yasaka stood up as she spoke. However, of course, there was a deep sadness hidden in her heart. The leader of the Yokai, a sensitive woman with power comparable to that of a demon king, did not know exactly what to do. Ajuka took a small step forward, about to suggest something when a dark red transport circle appeared not far from them. This caught the attention of everyone present, who looked on with curiosity, and in an instant, Itachi Uchiha emerged from the circle. The two demons' expressions were friendly. Serafal, of course, smiled brightly, and Ajuka seemed very pleased. However, Yasaka narrowed her eyes, bit her lower lip, took a step forward, and exchanged glances with Itachi. Sir Uchiha, I have been informed that you are one of the most powerful Lord Demons, so? Yasaka paused, her actions suggesting something obvious. She was completely disgusted. It seemed that with just one word from Itachi, Yasaka would have enough courage to take several steps forward and confront him. The woman's eyes said it all. One could feel her dissatisfaction even in the air. Serafal and Ajuka watched her with bright eyes, each of them seeming to already know what Yasaka would do next and about to interrupt her. We Yokai have lost more than half of our members. Hokkaido is now a ghost prefecture with almost no survivors. So, she looked at Itachi with narrowed eyes. What was Lord Uchiha doing while all this was happening? Why didn't Lord Uchiha warn us earlier about the danger of Orochimaru? Yasaka's voice resonated with righteous indignation. She carried the deaths of more than half of the Yokai on her shoulders, and more than 100,000 humans killed in Hokkaido, or at least, that was her perception. Lord Uchiha, you arrived in this world several months ago, and we Yokai only learned of Orochimaru a few days ago. The implications of her words were obvious. She looked at the ninja, waiting for his next words. Itachi found himself simply looking at her with calm eyes, as he had done before in the ninja world, facing the leader of the Yokai without even a flicker of emotion, his face unchanged even as she began to blame him for the death of the Yokai. Instead, Itachi blinked slightly, then looked at the two demon lords who were waiting for his response. Why didn't I report earlier on the danger of Orochimaru? The question answers itself, Lady Yasaka. Itachi let out a slight sigh. Why don't we simply send all of Japan's surplus food to neighboring countries suffering from malnutrition, such as Cambodia? Why don't we distribute the wealth of all humanity among all the humans who inhabit this world? The ninja lightly stroked the edge of his clothing. The answer is, because it's impossible. We are not cattle, we are not a computer algorithm that can divide resources equitably or process information in less than a second. Itachi took a few steps toward Yasaka. If I shared my knowledge about Orochimaru without knowing whether you would try to kill me too for considering me a threat, wouldn't that be stupid for my survival? Wouldn't that be literally putting a noose around my neck? Itachi smiled slightly. Things aren't that simple because I have my own interests, and these came before the Yokai, whom I don't know. I haven't shared food, water, or life with the Yokai, so I preferred to save my own interests before saving someone I don't know and with whom I shared nothing. Itachi leaned forward slightly. There was a brief moment of silence. Yasaka opened her eyes and took a step back. She was, to a certain extent, disgusted. She never thought that this extremely handsome boy would have such a twisted way of thinking. She was about to yell at Itachi to get out of her sight when she began to think about his words. She narrowed her eyes. In fact, Itachi's words made sense in her mind. I couldn't sacrifice even one Yokai to save 1,000 demons, she admitted to herself as she watched the ninja. She was about to open her mouth to apologize for her previous words when Itachi suddenly smiled. But now I have shared a table and time with you, Yasaka, so I will take care of protecting the Yaokai as well. Today was my mistake, and I will fix it. Itachi said, his voice ringing with almost unprecedented clarity. Seraphal took a step forward and opened her mouth to say something just as Itachi's body turned into many crows that cawed and flew in all directions. Chapter 82, Reasons to Continue. Yasaka stared at the spot where Itachi had been standing for a moment, then turned her head slightly to look at Seraphal and Ajuka. The two demon lords were also confused. We need to contact Itachi to form a front with Surzetsu and establish a curfew in Japan and the world. Ajuka quickly conjured a communication portal, through which he attempted to speak. Itachi, can you hear me? It's Ajuka. Beelzebub tried, but in full view of Seraphal and Yasaka, there was no response from the other side. In the middle of a small square in Tokyo, Akino blinked slowly, watching the sky with clouds covering the sun while a boy lay sitting to her right, the sun having slightly warmed the grass on which their backs rested. Akino let out a slight sigh. When she returned to the Yaokai shrine in Kyoto that morning, she didn't see her friend Ria's grimoire anywhere. Asking Yasaka, she learned that Ria's had led a small squadron of demons to monitor the surroundings of Kyoto. This attitude of Ria's, which should have been normal for her in any kind of scenario, brought a slight surprise to Akino's mind at that moment. The president had never gone on a mission or any kind of scenario without me, she thought at that moment. It shouldn't have been a problem for Akino at any time, but when she received the news, a strange, dangerous feeling flooded her body, ran down her spine, and reached her brain, filling her body with a strange sensation. With a great "see you soon," Akino left the Yaokai shrine at that moment and walked through the city with no apparent destination. Coincidentally or not, she ran into Redragon near the edge of a deep forest. After a moment of conversation, they decided to simply spend some quality time together. And now they are there, staring at the sky without saying a single word, each apparently waiting for the other to say something. Redragon lightly touched the edge of his shirt. There was a strange, bright light on his face. His short hair and black eyes, characteristic of the Uchiha clan, as well as his appearance identical to the now-dead Shisui Uchiha, which had amazed Itachi, now appeared calm. "Akino," Redragon said, turning his head slightly to look at the girl beside him, seeing her eyes slightly bright, her expression almost determined. "I have something to tell you." Akino also turned her head, a strange and genuine feeling of curiosity running through her body, her heart, her mind, and her soul. "Something to tell me," she murmured, moving her body to look more calmly at Redragon, a smile painting her face. "Are you going to confess your love for me, or are you going to ask for my hand in marriage?" She smiled brightly. However, Redragon's face was completely serious. He continued to stare at Akino for a few seconds without saying a word until he finally let out a long sigh. I. The boy narrowed his eyes, continuing to stare at Akino for a few moments before letting out another long sigh. "Have you heard of Orochimaru?" the boy said. Akino was not surprised, she simply lay there with a slight smile. In fact, as a demon, she had heard of Orochimaru. Also, as a person who uses chakra, she sensed the single chakra core in Redragon's stomach, something that made her curious because she had never seen a normal human with a chakra core. "I am Lord Orochimaru's experiment. I have vague memories in my mind, a village, a family, and an old man with his face covered in bandages." Redragon narrowed his eyes. "Then why?" Akino asked suddenly, interrupting the boy's words. "What is your goal in seducing me? Is it to kill me and then take my body to Lord Orochimaru so he can use one of his strange abilities on me?" Akino asked, but there was not even a trace of anger in her. The words simply came out of her mouth as small questions of no apparent importance. Redragon shook his head, then nodded a couple of times. "Actually, my mission was to take you to join Lord Orochimaru, but Redragon paused, looked into Akino's eyes, and she looked back at him. HMPH, I just wanted to reach your heart, but somehow you entered mine. You know, I'm stupid for falling in love with." However, before Re-Dragon could finish speaking, Akino interrupted him with a deep kiss. Standing there as if the grass were a motel bed, they began to make love, but unlike last night, they did so with such emotion that even Romeo and Juliet would have seemed like mere lovers. As the clouds in the sky hid the sun and gave them a warm and noble cover of darkness, the two came together like two predestined souls. Akino didn't know exactly at that moment. She could only hear Re-Dragon telling her beautiful stories of him and her together and painting a future with his hands. In the end, she simply said, "I accept," before the two became frantic. The news had spread throughout the world. The broadcast of Itachi fighting volley generated too much controversy, and that, coupled with the news from Hokkaido, the Japanese prefecture that had been completely devastated and turned into a city in ruins, caught the attention of all civilians around the world. Not only in Europe, but also in the US, Africa, the Middle East, and Latin America, different governments around the world began to frantically hold meetings, all ready to form a large coalition to send each other aid and support in case of an attack from Orochimaru. Civilians around the world were completely terrified. Some simply quit their jobs and flooded the supermarkets, ready to buy supplies. In more chaotic countries, society began to collapse. Thousands of people began looting businesses and stealing everything they could. Little by little, in these more chaotic countries, society would begin to collapse. While this was happening, in a remote village in northern Japan, here, Kaneko, followed by 3 people, finally arrived at a house that offered accommodation at a modest price. Kaneko paid for 1 night and food, followed by Kiba, Irina, and Zenobia. Kaneko decided to rest for the afternoon as night was falling. The 3 walked calmly to a large room and finally began to take off the luggage they were carrying to start resting. "I don't understand. We just traveled for several hours without rest to come to a house in the middle of an almost abandoned village," Irina grumbled, annoyed. Zenobia, on the other hand, sat down in a spot and leaned her back against the wall, seemingly not caring about anything else in life. "On this mission, we must obey little Kaneko. After all, these are Lord Orochimaru's orders," Kiba smiled, trying to calm everyone in the room. "We're following the trail I found from a reliable source. If all goes well, tomorrow we'll find and kill Kuroka." Kaneko's cold, calm voice echoed throughout the room. She took a tatami mat out of a built-in cabinet in the wall, spread it out on the floor, and simply began to prepare for bed. Kiba narrowed his eyes, looked at his old friend in that state, and couldn't help but sigh slightly. Chapter 83, Encounter with the Past. The next day in a small cabin at dawn. "Damn bitch," a drunk man cursed. There was a noise, and almost in the blink of an eye, a muffled cry of pain was heard before a body fell to the floor. Inside the cabin, a man fell to the floor, completely dead, his eyes already lifeless while his face showed an expression of anger. His fat body was lying on the floor, looking like a slaughtered pig. Although there was no blood coming out of any part of his body, anyone could clearly tell that the guy was dead. Not far from him, a beautiful girl with large breasts, a slender body, long legs, and a cheerful face looked at the man with a slight smile. "It looks like the little woodcutter won't be able to chop wood anymore. Nya." The girl licked the back of her hand like a cat as she smiled brightly. A woman hugging her son not far away was trembling constantly. From the marks on her body left by constant beatings, it was clear that her life was not a good one, while the child crying in her arms seemed to be half-blind, as only one of his eyes remained open. Kuroka smiled brightly, took a small wad of dollars from her clothes, and threw it to the mother not far from her. "Here, this is the money for letting me spend the night, Nya." The mother, who seemed to be completely huddled up, quickly took the wad of bills and hid it inside her clothes. Kuroka, who saw this, smiled slightly, stopped licking the back of her hand, grabbed the man's body by a corner of his clothes, and dragged him away from the house. "Why can you eat so much? Looking at your wife and son, it seems like you live in constant fasting," Kuroka muttered as she walked away from the house, still dragging the corpse, saying a few words, and finally entering the forest not far from it. A couple of kilometers later, she left the corpse in a visible place to feed the lions, and finally thought about returning to spend another night in that pleasant cabin. However, just then, Kuroka moved his ears, tilted his head slightly, and with a frightened nya, dodged like a cat, a sword thrown like a spear in his direction. Kuroka quickly looked at the place where the sword had been thrown. It had stuck into the ground and disappeared completely, sinking into it. If the sword had hit her face in that state, it would have killed her instantly. A strange feeling of danger invaded the cat girl's heart. She let out a big, restrained sigh before looking up at the top of a tree not far away. "Who's there, nya?" she called out, but when she got no response, she simply shook her head. "I don't care what your goals are, nya, but if you plan to kill me, nya." She crouched slightly, her eyes sharpening, her body entering combat mode. "It seems you've forgotten about me." A strangely familiar voice made Kuroka open her eyes suddenly, her expression one of complete surprise, her body paralyzed for a moment as her eyes watched the treetop with some expectation. In an instant, several swords were thrown in her direction. Due to her surprise, Kuroka barely saw these swords coming and dodged them almost purely by instinct. "Damn it, nya," she cursed, as she dodged too late, one of the swords grazing her right arm, creating a large gash in her skin that caused several drops of blood to escape. Kuroka quickly regained her composure and looked back up at the treetop with her eyes slightly shining. "Kaneko, what are you doing here?" was Kuroka's first question after a moment of silence. 4 figures emerged from the treetop and jumped down to stand on the ground. The one in front was, of course, Kaneko. The other 3 were Kiba, Irina, and Zenobia. Kuroka's eyes narrowed sharply when she saw her sister's appearance. "What happened to your skin and hair?" she asked almost unconsciously, but Kaneko did not answer. The energy of nature quickly poured into Kuroka's body, causing her to grow 2 ears and 2 cattails. She once again adopted a battle stance as she focused her gaze on her younger sister. But as she focused on her sister's body, Kuroka almost let out a cry of surprise. "Is this senjutsu?" she wondered, only to shake her head almost immediately. "It's impossible. Senjutsu doesn't have this kind of purity." What was happening was a surprise to the cat girl. Her younger sister, Kaneko, had not only changed her skin and hair color, achieving a more yellowish and greenish appearance, but a strange energy similar to the senjutsu she uses, but hundreds of times purer, ran through Kaneko's body. Observing Kaneko's companions, Kuroka also noticed that this strange form of senjutsu also ran through their bodies, but with the difference that they had a lower concentration of this rare senjutsu in them. Finally, Kuroka narrowed her eyes when she saw that her little sister's ears and tail also had that strange color. "This isn't senjutsu. Magic needs to combine with natural energy to form a new form of energy called senjutsu. What you're wielding is pure natural energy, which is unstable," Kuroka muttered under her breath. "I've finally found you, Kuroka. It's been a long time since I last saw you. Now, seeing you like this, with those torn and loose clothes with that playful look," Kaneko's face turned to one of deep contempt for her sister. "You look like a prostitute offering her services to any man." Kaneko showed her contempt with a look of deep disgust for her sister. After all, for her, all the misfortunes that had occurred in her life had one name: Kuroka. "Kiba in front, Irina and Zenobia on the sides. I'll take care of attacking her from behind." Kaneko gave her orders like a powerful commander. "Understood." The 3 quickly formed a position with Kiba in front. "Is this the team you formed to hunt me down for what happened years ago, nya?" Kuroka scratched her head, still remembering when she had to kill her leader to save her life and Kaneko's, and then handed little Kaneko over to the princess of the Gremory clan. Although at the time she did it to save her little sister from the clutches of that heartless demon scientist, she never told her sister about it, her reasons remaining unclear until now. Despite appearing calm and serene, Kuroka was sweating profusely. She could feel a strange energy coming from those 3 people and her little sister. It could be said that each of them was very powerful, above even a high-level demon. "That strange, pure natural energy," Kuroka muttered with some hesitation. She couldn't know exactly what the pure natural energy her sister and those beings forming a combat position were using was, but one thing was certain: she could only find out by fighting. Kiba narrowed his eyes, crouched slightly, looked Kuroka in the eyes, and lunged forward with a great leap. Chapter 84, Battle Against the Past. Kuroka moved quickly, her body almost completely disappearing as she advanced, the hair on her ears and tail bristling, striking Kiba's swords with a weapon similar to a small knife. Kuroka's strength, still superior, was enough to generate a small shockwave that sent Kiba a couple of meters back. HMPH, however, when her small dagger struck the boy's swords, she sensed something different in the atmosphere. She let out a slight sigh, looked ahead, and watched with almost cold and absolute surprise as the boy quickly recovered and charged at her again. What? She opened her eyes wide, but before she could react or say anything, Kaneko had appeared in front of her, Kaneko's powerful fist striking her in the stomach. Impact! Grog! Kuroka let out a powerful roar of pain as Kaneko's blow broke through her defenses and almost caused her internal organs to explode. She was sent flying dozens of meters backward as she spat blood. FWH, what was that? She wondered, closing her eyes in pain while still in the air, but without even a moment to rest, Kiba stepped forward, appeared above her, and swung his sword ferociously. Kuroka saw him. The yellowish-green-haired boy appeared in front of her with a sword in his hands. The sword came down sharply. It was like a flash to her, a sudden descent. A casual movement, the boy, Kiba, with a single movement cut off her arm, separating it from her body. Why you're joking? Kuroka thought, not knowing when Kaneko had made such powerful friends. She quickly moved her head to the side only to see the stump of her arm spurting blood. Dread overwhelmed her. Her eyes began to dilate as her teeth looked increasingly ferocious. You're kidding, she screamed as she fell to her feet, but just then Kaneko had already appeared behind her. Kuroka felt it, a chill ran down her spine. A strange feeling invaded her body, her mind. She tried to turn around forcefully. But before she could do that, Kaneko had already made her move. Kaneko got up quickly, took a small jump, moved her arm, and with an expressionless face, hit Kuroka's head hard. This blow quickly transported Kuroka to a strange world. She lost control of her body, and the world became silent, colorless, and without her. Before the two-tailed cat girl could even think about it, the thing she had been running from for so long had arrived so quickly that she would never have imagined it, even in her wildest dreams. Kuroka never thought about it. There was no reason to. She would never have thought that her little sister would kill her. She had always considered her someone to protect, and yet she never bothered to tell her the truth about what had happened. Time seemed to slow down. Kaneko watched as her sister was pushed several meters to the side by the force of her blow, falling dozens of meters behind with her neck completely shattered. Kaneko thought about what her sister had done when she was little, about the reasons why she had tried to kill her for so long. It's over, the past no longer exists, Kaneko thought, feeling immense relief in her heart. She had finally killed her sister, and yet, as cruel and ruthless as that phrase may sound, she sat down on the grass, letting herself fall, and looked up at the sky. The wind gently ruffled her hair as she gazed at the morning sun. As she lay there, Kiba watched her with mixed feelings and emotions on his face. Irina and Zenobia, who hadn't even had a chance to fight, remained in their positions, also looking up at the sky. Kaneko watched the sun with increasing strangeness, blinking from time to time. Despite everything, a thought settled in her mind like a plague. Why did I want to kill my sister? Questioning the reason was something recent. Before, she had really only had her sister's death in mind, but why? Kaneko tilted her head and breathed in the forest air somewhat rapidly. She seemed to be about to do something. She didn't really know why she had wanted to kill her sister. That thought appeared after fighting that strange demon, or she narrowed her eyes. Kaneko thought about it. She had never wanted to kill her sister, even when she was younger, and the wound of her being a traitor was more painful. Instead, that feeling had emerged more strongly since Kiba's death. She lowered her head to look at the grass and then at Kuroka's body a few feet away from her. She reached out her hand slightly, as if from that distance she could touch the edge of her older sister's clothes. An empty feeling came over her. Is this wrong? She wondered, her heart beginning to fill with an endless emptiness that seemed to swallow everything, from her motivations to her deepest emotions. Suddenly, Kaneko found herself enveloped in an emotional void. Her eyes began to shine, and before she knew it, tears began to run down her cheeks. "No, this is so wrong, this is not how it should be, there is something strange here," she muttered. She felt that there was something wrong with the world, that this should never have happened, and the mere thought of it overwhelmed her. "Kaneko," Kiba ran over to see if his little friend was okay. The next day in the underworld. "Lord Lucifer, I request the complete opening of the gates of hell to fight Orochimaru on Earth," one of the leaders of the main demons shouted. "Lord Lucifer, the underworld has been too quiet lately. The fallen angels through Vali have shown which side they are on. The angels are not responding to any calls, and the Nordics seem to have vanished. We request the complete release of the demons," another clan leader said confidently. "Lord Lucifer, it has been a couple of days since Orochimaru's last attack on Hokkaido, and although we do not know the exact information, I do well to ask, where is Lord Uchiha?" one of the demons questioned. A meeting of clan leaders was taking place in the underworld. All the current clan leaders had gathered to decide on swift actions to counter Orochimaru. The news of the snake's attack on Hokkaido had caught the attention of all the clan leaders, and listening to the report from Lord Beelzebub and Lady Leviathan, everyone in the underworld already knew that Orochimaru was a threat that had to be eliminated at all costs. Serzetz, sitting on the stage, looked at the entire parliament of demon clan leaders with his bright eyes. Although he appeared imposing and determined, he really did not know what to do. "If I allow the gates of the underworld to open, then the demons will be able to freely enter the human world and the peace agreement will be broken," he muttered under his breath. Graphia, sitting to his right, heard him, smiled, took his hand, and leaned in slightly to whisper. "The fallen angels are allied with Orochimaru, and the angels are not responding. Don't you think the peace agreement has already been broken?" Graphia said, reminding Serzetz of the latest events. Chapter 85, Liberation of the Underworld and Motivations. "Lord Lucifer, we demand that the gates of the underworld be opened." "Lord Lucifer, we demand that the gates of the underworld be opened." "Lord Lucifer, we demand that the gates of the underworld be opened." Several demons demanded, standing up and looking at Serzetz in front of them with shining eyes, their expressions somewhat defiant. Seeing this, Serzetz couldn't help but smile. He took a step forward, stood up, looked at everyone present with bright eyes and raised a hand. "Well, since you have made up your minds," he said with a half-smile, looking at everyone. "The underworld will have its gates open from now on." With that said, part of Lucifer's powerful aura was released, putting pressure on all the demons present. HHMPH. Several demons felt Lucifer's powerful pressure exerted against them, causing them to fall to their knees on the floor. They quickly looked at the demon on the stage with bright eyes. "Long live the underworld! Long live the underworld!" A few hours later in the human world, several portals opened. The underworld is part of the world, previously divided by magical barriers that kept the demons confined. These barriers began to crack, and various portals connecting the underworld to the human world began to open naturally. As this happened, the world itself began to be surrounded by a strange, dense, enormous, and gigantic fog that, although it did not prevent the sun from shining, did dim it a little. The world, created by God itself, was a chaotic place, an immense planet covered by two types of fog, one white and one black, places where magic and pure energy such as light counteracted each other. Once the treaty was signed, these mists were sealed and turned into heaven and the underworld respectively, and on Earth, humanity began to prosper. Now, once again, the dark, dense, blackish fog begins to surround the human world, but in the absence of the white fog, this black fog surrounded the entire planet as if trying to absorb it. Looking at the sky, which was once blue but now had slight shades of purple due to the mixture of colors, Issei Hyoudou put down his hoe and rubbed his head lightly. It hadn't really been that long since he decided to go live with Kuryuu in a remote village in Japan, and now strange things were happening in the world again. Issei wiped the sweat from his face, looked at this, and then patted the chakra node in his stomach, the only one in his body, which was still overflowing with abundant chakra, even more than when he faced Riser in the underworld. Issei let out a slight sigh, D-Drake hasn't been responding to my calls lately. Maybe he just left. He muttered. After all, he understood. D-Drake had felt that Albion had ceased to exist and was sealed in something strange. Looking back, Issei saw Kuryuu cooking in the small hut not far away. She seemed quite happy, tilting her head from time to time, and Issei could feel life growing in the stomach of his girlfriend, soon-to-be wife. He smiled slightly. The strangeness of the underworld, huh? Issei muttered, taking a small, worn notebook out of his pocket. It was Midalt's notebook, or rather, his diary. Issei had never opened it because, deep down, he felt that if he did, something strange would be released and take hold of him. Issei looked at the hoe in his hands, then at the book. HMPH, sometimes ignorance is bliss, or as that saying went. Issei smiled, remembering Itachi's words. He quickly moved away from the garden, dug a deep hole in the ground, and with determination, threw Midalt's unread diary into the bottom of the hole. What is dead must return to the earth, and life must go on, Issei muttered as he filled the hole with dirt. Elsewhere, in a small underground base on the outskirts of Japan. Here, Akino and Redragon slowly entered a tunnel. This is Lord Orochimaru's newest base. Although we are only subordinates here for the moment, it also serves to hide us from prying eyes, Redragon said calmly, gripping Akino's hand tightly as he smiled. You are, to a certain extent, a stranger here, but once the leader of the base helps you shed that identity as a demon or fallen angel, you can join us. The boy spoke with such enthusiasm that Akino couldn't help but smile. She didn't even look back, didn't blink, didn't hesitate. She knew that Ria's Gremory was happy now, she knew that Kaneko had found her way, she knew that Issei was thinking of leaving the club to do something with Kuryuu, and she knew that Kiba was dead. There really isn't much reason for me to stay with the president, she thought, grabbing the hand of the boy who made her feel something for the first time in her life and couldn't help but blush. You are, to a certain extent, the only thing that brought me back from that strange loop of feelings and strange thoughts, Akino thought as she looked at Redragon's back. The demons of the underworld will probably try to kill Orochimaru and kill you as a result, but she licked her lips, a strange feeling ran through her body, a kind of premonition invaded her mind. But I somehow will be with you to die by your side if necessary, she thought, a naive thought of a girl in her first love, anyone would have thought, a fleeting thought, full of a certain expectation, warmth, and hope. Akino then made up her mind, took a step forward, and hugged Redragon from behind. Together, until death do us part? She asked with such sweetness and hope that even the most enamored woman in the world would have been dumbfounded by her. Together until death do us part. Redragon repeated fervently, touched Akino's hand on his shoulder and chest, felt the warmth running inside her, the blood running through the veins of the woman he loves, and finally let out a long, restrained sigh. I love you, Akino. I love you, Redragon. In a village not far from Tohoku Prefecture in Japan, in a small rented cabin. The group of 4 led by Kaneko eats from a small hot pot boiling with delicious broth in the center of the small cabin. A kind of ancient and traditional steam suction device lies on top of the pot, enough to keep the cabin from filling with steam from the broth. Kiba was really curious, even a little worried, and he glanced at Kaneko from time to time between sips. His little friend had been quite pensive that day, and it was already nighttime. There were certain traits he noticed in his friend that he had seen before. Kiba thought it was almost a premonition. He slowly lifted some porridge from his plate and put it in his mouth, even though he didn't need to eat. Somehow, Kaneko had asked everyone to have dinner tonight. Isn't this the same thing Kaneko said was happening to the president? Kiba wondered. He looked with some expectation at his friend's tired face, her lost eyes, her empty gaze. You're practically the spitting image of what you described, remember? Kiba broke the silence with his comment. Irina and Zenobia looked at him strangely, but Kiba ignored them. What you said about the president, now you're behaving that way, Kaneko. However, his words did not catch the attention of his little companion. Kiba narrowed his eyes in slight annoyance and looked again, this time more intently, at Kaneko. Until a few days ago, you were completely determined to do it, and you've succeeded, Kaneko. Why? However, before Kiba could finish speaking to encourage his friend, she opened her mouth. From now on, I am returning to Lord Orochimaru. That is my order, and you must obey it." With that order given, Kiba's body began to move of its own accord. He could only open his mouth and say, "Let's talk about this. You don't have to." But Kiba's voice gradually faded away as his body moved quickly to return to Orochimaru. Kaneko stood watching as the three revived characters rushed out the open window. "To a certain extent, I did it, didn't I? I killed my sister. That shouldn't have happened. This world is wrong." Capítulo 86, Release of a Burden. The white-haired cat girl, whose hair had turned greenish and yellowish, looked out at the street through her window. Outside, all was quiet, and small gusts of cold wind blew in through the window, hitting her face. "Kuroka," Kaneko murmured. It almost seemed as if something beyond, outside, behind the window she had decided to forge, was watching her. Then, with absolute serenity, she took a step forward, observed the cold passage outside with her eyes becoming increasingly sharp, and in one swift movement, jumped out the window, her destination. Uncertain. "This world is wrong. This world is wrong. This world is wrong." The cat girl repeated to herself as she ran on all fours, her cat ears and tail growing larger and larger, and her body taking on an even more feline tone. On a quiet street in Kyoto. Here, a group of high-level demons led by Ria's Gremory had just eliminated and captured one of Orochimaru's lackeys, each of them celebrating with bright smiles on their faces, and Ria's Gremory watching them with a pleased expression. "I'm sure Itachi will appreciate this achievement, right?" she muttered to herself. After all, at the end of the day, she couldn't help but smile like a madwoman whenever she was around Itachi. Ria's Gremory's thoughts were filled with various images of her being dominated by Itachi, him subduing her on a bed, making her his wife, as they spent their entire lives together, married. Then nothing else occupied her mind. Ria's Gremory observed the high-level demons near them. "You will help me secure a bigger place in my Itachi's heart. Hehehe." She began to laugh like a madwoman in a low voice. She didn't even notice the total absence of the members of her peerage, who had once shared so many life experiences with her. Her mind, formerly absorbed by a feeling of uncertainty and existential crisis, was now completely occupied by Itachi. At the gates of heaven, a couple of days later. Here, Orochimaru had remained seated, using his body to channel chakra to the seed of the god tree planted not far from him. Several revived by the high-level Edo Tensei surrounded him with serious expressions, and not far from him, several fallen angels waited with absolute hope for the emergence of the god tree. "The demons haven't found us yet. That's good news, however. I can't say the same about an old friend." Orochimaru, now with completely green skin and bright green hair, muttered softly, opened his eyes slightly, looked to the side at Ruval Phoenix and said, "Go, inform Azazel that he has to stop Itachi for at least an hour. Everyone else, go and help too. If he interrupts me now, then everything will have been a failure." With that said, Ruval nodded and moved. Ruval's body turned into a greenish phoenix that quickly traveled a great distance, in full view of everyone present. As Ruval warned everyone he passed that Lord Uchiha was about to arrive to attack, everyone prepared for battle. Sitting in his seat, Orochimaru breathed calmly, occasionally moving his body from left to right as if he were relaxing. "At least all the reincarnated should also go into battle. Only you two stay here." Orochimaru looked at two high-level reincarnated and gave concise orders. "Yes, Lord Orochimaru." Both bowed and stood guard to Orochimaru's left and right. The gate to heaven is located in a hidden place in China, in a vast, unexplored and completely empty forest, where there is a giant temple that serves as an anchor point between heaven and earth. Unlike the fallen angels, who settle in certain places around the world and use them as their base, or the demons, who have a separate dimensional plane for themselves, the angels are a little different. Heaven itself is a world connected to Earth that can be accessed through multiple spells that only angels can use, or as God dictated in his time, through the temple in the middle of an immense forest that was once bright and vaunted, although in these times it has been forgotten. Itachi had been searching for several days in abandoned Orochimaru bases and torturing some people who were witnesses to finally find the whereabouts of the temple. At first, he was a little doubtful that the temple would really be the gateway to heaven that would open at the moment of the apocalypse, but with little to lose, he decided to move toward that gate. Itachi flew through the sky like lightning at high speed, breaking the wind as he advanced and generating a strange noise. The two enormous wings behind him, several times larger than himself, did not move, and his chakra was still contained. "The time has finally come," Itachi murmured, looking at the temple more than 100 kilometers away from him and smiling slightly. "You, Orochimaru, you should not have come into this world. You are a threat," he whispered to himself before picking up his pace. However, just a dozen kilometers away, a transparent square barrier suddenly rose around the temple, and a thick, powerful voice was heard coming from inside the temple. "You have entered the territory of the fallen angels. Retreat now." The voice sounded certainly peculiar. If Surzech had been here, he would probably have thought of Azazel upon hearing that voice. "Retreat," Itachi smiled, raised his left hand, ignored the voice's warning, and quickly moved both hands, fire style. Hell! Just a couple of miles away from the temple, Itachi inhaled and then blew thousands of small fireballs that charged like tiny missiles toward the magical barrier. Inside the magic barrier, Azazel watched this with slightly narrowed eyes. At first glance, it looked like hailstones of fire falling from the sky at high speed. The condensation of magic in that attack is strange. He licked his lips. "Team 4, you need to reinforce the amount of magic you use in the barrier, at least double what you are using now." Azazel gave concrete and direct orders. The next moment, crash, crash, tens of thousands of small fireballs slammed into the barrier, each generating a small shockwave and explosion. Not only that, but inside the barrier, thousands of fallen angels and hundreds of reincarnated beings felt a powerful pressure coming from the sky. The sound was overwhelming. Hundreds of small explosions shook the barrier, sending a strange feeling to the fallen angels who had prepared themselves for the coming battle, causing them to pale. "Sir, the attack is..." Penemu behind Azazel muttered with genuine surprise, clenching his hands into two small, tightly closed fists. "Listen, my brothers," Azazel shouted loudly, using magic to make his voice heard even several miles away. "The enemy, Capitulo 87, won against more than 1,000. Now I will return to heaven to take the place that is rightfully mine, and you won't be able to stop me." Azazel shot upward, breaking the fragile barrier himself and unleashing a powerful attack against the rain of small fireballs. "Light shield." Azazel quickly conjured a large shield that covered the temple from all the small fireballs and pushed the gigantic shield forward. The immense shield looked strange from a distance, like a bright lantern pushing against the sky. Itachi saw this, narrowed his eyes, stopped channeling his attack, and quickly his eyes shifted from their base state to Mangekyo Sharingan in an instant. "Itachi Uchiha?" Azazel shouted fervently as he charged toward the ninja. In his eyes, besides accumulated anger, there was a certain hope, a certain excitement. His 12 wings moved fiercely behind him. Itachi watched all this, a slight smile on his face, slowly shook his head while moving his eyes toward the gigantic shining shield ahead. "Is this all you have? Pathetic." The ninja blinked slightly, focused his eyes on the shield ahead, and a moment later a massive black fire began burning and evaporating the energy that composed the immense shield. Azazel felt it, retreating several hundred meters as he moved away from the immense shield that burned until nothing remained. What does this mean? He wondered, confusion in his gaze. The leader of the fallen angels quickly condensed a powerful sword of light in front of him. Penemu, Cockabeel, Sariel, and Armeros quickly positioned themselves behind Azazel, each with a bright light sword of a different shape. "I don't have time to waste on you, why not just end this?" Itachi smiled. The next moment he brought his hands together. The sky darkened, black clouds quickly gathered. From the spot where Itachi stood emanated an absurd amount of chakra that quickly caught the attention of the fallen angels. "We need to conjure a combined attack to defeat him," Azazel shouted, drawing the attention of the cadres and fallen angels below him. His eyes narrowed, his gaze became dangerous as he looked forward defiantly. "Itachi Uchiha?" Azazel brought his palms together, All the fallen angels did the same, looking at the intruder from another world who had come to annihilate them. Each of the fallen angels had, besides hatred, hope in their eyes. "We, the fallen angels, will reclaim the heaven," Azazel shouted. The other fallen angels nodded their heads, each condensing a flash of light of a different color in their hands. However, facing this display of power and strength, Itachi simply gave a half-smile, observing them as if looking at ants before opening his mouth. "Why don't you just shut up?" The next moment, a huge 100-meter-tall Susanoo, condensed with Itachi's body, completely protected inside it. "The fallen angels will return to heaven." With Azazel's shout, thousands of columns of light from all directions shot toward the Susanoo. Hundreds of those revived by Orochimaru's Edo Tensei moved forward to launch all kinds of attacks against the Susanoo in Itachi's sky. Observing all this from a not-too-distant location, Orochimaru let out a slight sigh. "The light is so bright it almost feels like I'm in that famous heaven that little Azazel talks about. Don't you think so, Ruval?" Orochimaru let out a small laugh while observing the completely bright sky. The snake moved slightly in his place, licked his lips, moved its body. Its hands seemed almost to tremble uncontrollably, and finally it let out a crazy smile. "This level of chakra, I should have expected it. Itachi-kun has fully fused demonic magic with chakra. It seems they won't be able to stop us soon. Doesn't that make you happy?" Kyukuku Orochimaru spoke while turning his head in a specific direction. In that direction was a group of a boy and two girls. "Only you have returned, Kiba, Zenovia, Irina. It seems my premonitions about Kaneko were correct. What a pity." Orochimaru slightly lowered his head as if expressing sorrow over the loss of a family member. "What do you know? What is Kaneko doing?" Kiba demanded, stepping forward. Though he could not disobey Orochimaru's orders or harm him, that did not prevent him from speaking. "Kaneko, I'm afraid I've lost connection with her. She's probably wandering around, but she has likely lost her rationality, most likely," Orochimaru smiled. Kiba tried to ask more but could not. The snake immobilized him with a thought. In the sky, after receiving the attack from thousands of powerful beings, Itachi's Susanoo remained hidden by the smoke formed from previous attacks. It still remained there, and if someone looked from beneath the cloud, they could see the Susanoo in perfect condition. The first to notice was Azazel, who saw it with wide eyes and a palpitating heart. A deep fear took hold of his body as his mind began to think. How the hell is it possible that the combination of all the fallen angels' attacks and Orochimaru's revived help has not managed to bring down the ninja? "Brothers," Azazel shouted, about to give orders when at that moment a powerful sword appeared, piercing through his body and the other cadres as if that sword were a hologram. "What?" Azazel squinted his eyes, about to speak when he felt his soul being slowly absorbed by the giant sword. His eyes widened with absolute terror, his mind filled with many thoughts. He tried to move his body like the other cadres, but it was impossible. "You've been making too much noise lately. Why don't you just shut up?" Itachi said from a distance, watching with calm eyes Azazel's body slowly being devoured by Totsuka. "It's incredible how the fallen angels dare to challenge angels and demons with only you in command. It's rare?" Itachi smiled, seeing Azazel's body slowly absorbed by Totsuka while he shouted some curses. Before being completely absorbed by Totsuka, Azazel could not help but let out one last look at Itachi, seeing his determined gaze, those strange, hidden cold eyes. He could only let out a slight laugh, as his body was completely absorbed, and his soul sealed. The fallen angels had no escape, nor did Orochimaru's revived. With just a swing of Totsuka, Itachi could kill hundreds of them, seal them, and take their souls. None of the attacks against the Susanoo were effective, and in just a blink, the fallen angels were erased from the world along with much of Orochimaru's revived. All this before the eyes of the snake, who kept smiling brightly. He saw Itachi moving in the sky, balancing the Susanoo, killing without remorse. And when Itachi appeared in front of him in just a blink, with the sky full of black clouds and lightning here and there, he could not help but look at Itachi with a gaze that said 1,000 things. "You did great, Itachi-kun. Doesn't this scene remind you of something? You killed everyone here, you know." Orochimaru smiled while sitting on his legs, placing his hands on the ground as if channeling something. The Uchiha clan massacre, remember. It was exactly the same. Itachi. Capítulo 88, Finale. Itachi narrowed his eyes, observed Orochimaru sitting there, watching him while smiling. He also noticed Ruval Phoenix and other revived not far away. His eyes focused on Kiba in the distance, lying weak and immobilized. It's over for you, Orochimaru, do you understand? Itachi whispered with a slight smile, slowly raising his hand. The snake watched him, observed that hand rising with ferocity, so fierce that the movement was slow and precise. Over, that's what you think, Itachi-kun, you know, the snake said while licking his lips. I wasn't lying. I have no intention of doing anything in this world except observing the changes you can bring, and you've already brought quite a few. They looked at each other. Who knows how much time had passed, more than a decade perhaps. Itachi certainly looked at Orochimaru with a certain nostalgia, a certain resentment, and an almost palpable curiosity in his gaze. You're dead at the end of the day. The God Tree seed still needs at least 50 more minutes to bloom. What exactly do you want by doing all this? Itachi asked, confident and genuinely curious about Orochimaru's answer. For his part, the snake simply returned his gaze again, lifted his palms from the ground, bowed slightly, and said, Nothing, I want nothing, just to see how you change the world, and I've already seen too much, Orochimaru said before standing up. This world is in chaos, you know? People in Europe, the US, Latin America, the Middle East, all killing each other to get food. They think the end of the world is coming. That's a huge change. The world destabilized in less than a month. You, Orochimaru, stepped forward. You are the one who caused all this, Itachi Uchiha. Honestly, if I hadn't sensed your chakra when I came to this world, I would have retired to live as a bitter old man, but you motivated me. So, are you happy with the current suffering in the world? Orochimaru was about to say something else, but Itachi quickly condensed a sword that pierced his body without cutting his flesh. Kyukuku, the snake could not help but laugh out loud, leaning back and looking at the sky with a face lost in many thoughts. Totsuka, like in the old times. He almost seemed happy at the mere fact that she would soon be sealed again. This time I haven't prepared any vessel for reincarnation. I guess it's over, he finally said, lowering his voice to a softer tone. Itachi Uchiha, you're incredible, and at the same time an idiot, you know? I was really surprised when you massacred your entire clan. I thought you'd help them escape Konoha. You and Shisui could have kept them alive for a while. Maybe I would have helped, who knows? Orochimaru said, while his body began to be absorbed by Totsuka. Finally, Tabarama is somewhat right. The Uchiha are crazy, he said, closing his eyes calmly, like someone deciding to rest after an exhausting day, never to wake again. Itachi stayed there for a moment, observing the situation, watching Orochimaru being absorbed. The clouds in the sky, dark and stormy, began to clear, revealing a calm sky full of life. Itachi observed this for a moment, looking at the ground where the artificial God Tree seed was buried, apparently created by Orochimaru. The ninja began to bend slightly, pushed his hand into the earth, stirred it, grabbed the God Tree seed, and tucked it into his clothing. The ninja paused for a moment, observing the place, all the chaos, everything the fallen angels had caused along with Orochimaru. At the end of the day, it all came down to that. Is this the end of everything? Just a few guys with this level of power destabilized the world. The ninja wondered, though he didn't believe it. It had been too easy, and he distrusted that everything was truly over. But I have the God Tree seed, Itachi said to himself, feeling the seed in his clothing. He narrowed his eyes and looked in a specific direction. There was a large closed door. Lucifer said he hasn't been able to communicate with the angels for some time. At first, it was thought that the fallen angels along with Orochimaru might be keeping the angels at bay. Itachi whispered as he flew toward the gigantic door. Standing in front of it, he noticed something strange. The patterns on the door formed the figure of a dragon flying over a void that seemed infinite. Itachi squinted even more. He approached, moved his right hand, and patted the door before closing his eyes and feeling its texture. HMPH, there's no magical energy in this door. It seems like a giant, ordinary metal door, the ninja said. Maybe I should discuss it with the demons for now to decide how to act. Saying this, Itachi stepped away from the door. The following weeks passed almost too quickly. Itachi was received by Asia Argento in the underworld. She wore a beautiful maid outfit and had cooked a stew. With Orochimaru and the fallen angels exterminated by Itachi, peace began to be established in the world. The demons took control of the governments and the most powerful countries to establish a curfew and restore order. Ria's Gremory led many demons, working hard and hoping for recognition from Itachi. Gradually, over the months, humans were being turned into demons and recruited. If everything continued at that pace, the demons would eventually occupy the entire human world. In the remote villages of Japan, a few months later, a legend was heard. At night, a man walked through the forests, holding a dirty book in his hand and a shovel resting on his shoulder, wandering aimlessly, occasionally sobbing. But not for a loss, rather for a cruel destiny and a woman who didn't understand him and was strange. In the mountains of Kyoto, a tale spread of two lovers who played and had fun. Both seemed to have chosen the world as a place to demonstrate their love, and their legend began to spread, taken up by enthusiastic young lovers. However, on the border of Japan and China, an unpleasant legend spread. It was said that a white cat the size of a person attacked people and devoured their flesh mercilessly. Many low, mid, and high-ranking demons tried to hunt it without success. Occasionally, a voice could be heard coming from inside that giant cat, a pleasant and soft voice, like that of a young girl. Meanwhile, several months later, Itachi stood with Surzech in front of the door to heaven. We have completely lost contact with the angels. The Nordics seem to have disappeared from the earth for no apparent reason. Perhaps we can find the answer by opening the door, Surzech said as he prepared to unleash all his power and destroy the giant door. I don't know, it's strange. Orochimaru didn't even fight. Azazel was very weak, nothing coherent for a man of his status and power, but Itachi touched his chest, feeling a slight pressure reaching his heart. The world is already at peace, and there are almost no pure humans left. All have become demons. For the good of everyone, we need to enter heaven. Surzech placed a hand on Itachi's shoulder. The ninja understood, exchanged a significant look with the demon, nodded slightly, smiled a little, rubbed his chest, and said, I understand. The end. Hi, I've reached more or less the end. It's not how I'd like. I've spent a year or two without writing fantasy, and I'm rusty, so I didn't do it well. It was my fault. Although it has many inconsistencies, I completed it, and I think that's what counts. Honestly, I'm more of a dark and psychological fantasy writer, so this book was completely out of my comfort zone. However, I think it turned out fairly well. If you liked it and you like dark and psychological fantasy, I'll be publishing another Naruto book, now with my natural dark touch. Here's my web novel profile. Thanks for reading, especially for commenting on each chapter. Thanks, Goida, for each comment. New fanfiction. NARUTO, Fractured Mind. Divan, a reincarnated necromancer who worked as the caretaker of Konoha's cemetery, came to this world with a counter called Fractured Mind, which increases with the psychological suffering of others. When he's forced to become Naruto's guardian, he faces a dark temptation. Protect the boy destined to be a hero or manipulate his emotional fragility to feed his own thirst for knowledge. From the shadows, the third Hokage watches, suspecting that this quiet man hides a deadly secret. Finn.